Good late night, everyone. In the eastern seaboard. Um, I was visiting a cousin in New Jersey, and on my way back, I decided to put this prompt in here. Well, author's note. Um, and see what it will make. And it's time for through the lens of affect theory, harm reduction. I mean, lens affect theory, because the last time was new materialism. So we're gonna do affect theory now. Affect is, emotions without the emotional word to it or something, or the stuff that happens before emotions. A very immediate, most immediate response. Let's see. And now, new music playlist via Suno. All right. Where am I? Okay.
The dark side of meth is America. Dark side of meth is America. Type. Critical essay. Thesis. The so-called dark side of methamphetamine is not an intrinsic property of the chemical, but a mirror reflecting America's untreated social sicknesses, economic despair, moral panic, and the violent logics of the drug war. This is not an accident. War is always waged against the population, against soil and against bodies, and the drug war is America's longest undeclared war. The image of the crazed, hollow-eyed tweaker, with their scabs and rotten teeth, is not a portrait of chemical decay, but a portrait of war-torn flesh, a uniform fashioned by policy and neglect. The face of meth is the face of rural poverty, the shuttered factory, the town where the only profitable business is the prison. The fictions is faces of meth, those grotesque before and after photos, are not fictions of drug use, but fictions of a country grinding its own people to dust and then blaming the dust. The police, with their military surplus gear, are not peacekeepers in this war. They are occupied, and addiction is not treated as a health crisis, but as an insurgency. Every confiscated pipe is a weapon seized in this low-grade civil war. Every arrest, a population pacified. Harm reduction workers, the medics in this conflict, understand this effectively. They operate from a premise entirely foreign to the state. You cannot fight fire with violence, but with another kind of warmth. At needle exchanges for safe consumption sites where they are permitted to exist. The rare patches of contested sovereignty, the atmosphere is different. The quality of light through the window, the quiet clatter of a plastic box of foil strips being opened. These things hold a different informational frequency than the interrogation room or the emergency department. The user is not brought into a relation of guilt and coercion, but into a community of embodied risk. Here, the meth user's tachypsychia, that subjective feeling of racing thoughts and hyper-awareness, is met not with punishment, but with conversation, or perhaps simply with a blended. The jittery, humming effect of stimulation is allowed to exist in a space where it will not become a pretext for violence. This is a profoundly political act as much as it is a medical one. The gesture of a sandwich offered without a lecture, of sterile cottons provided without a demand for treatment, repudiates the entire moral framework that fuels the war. It recognizes the lived reality of the high not as a moral failing, but as a present tense embodiment of a life. To effect theoretically examine the space of the clandestine meth cook is to understand it as a crucible of perverse freedom. Abandoned trailers tucked into vast, empty counties behind barbed wire fences, clandestine labs hidden beneath floorboards in strip mall apartments. These liminal zones are dark satellites of state power. They are the necessary shadow of prohibition, the infrastructure that blossoms in the vacuum created by legitimate markets. The work is tactile and ritualistic. The chemist handles volatile solvents like a priest handling vestments. Every gesture precise and learned, passed down through DIY videos past burner phone to burner phone. Sharp chemical reek that seeps into their clothes and carries the smell of agency in a place where all other economic agency has been stripped away. This small, dangerous production of a community-owned stimulant is its own strange form of capitalism, a hyper-local DIY punk rock industry born of rural abandonment. The state frames this work as a scourge of chemical contamination, yet a single chemical spill from a DuPont plant can poison the water table for centuries. That one pot, cookies hanged as a menace to public health, while the regulated industries that knowingly saturate an entire census tract with fuzz chemicals earn stock dividends. The entire enterprise is captured in an effect. Consider the specific vibration of a meth comedam, the bone-deep lethargy, the porous and violated feeling of one's own skin, the foggy sense of hours smudged together. It is not a personal failing. It is the sonic resonance of a country refusing to take responsibility for its own withdrawal, its own sickness of empire. To reach for meth again at that moment, to stoke that inner furnace against the creeping damp of economic despair, is to engage in a dialogue not with a chemical ghost, but with the America that built the haunted house one now refuses to leave. This is a drug narrative that offers, most surprisingly, a measure of control in a life defined by its absence. Cooking, cleaning up. These are tasks done with purpose, no matter how self-destructive, that provide a predictable architecture where state and society have offered only collapse. The dark side of meth is America, and it wears every user's face. Let us then trace the map of this vibration as it radiates through the lived topography of use. A user, isolated and sleepless for 72 hours, begins to organize the screws in a junk drawer by size and thread. An act dismissed by psychiatry as compulsive as symptomatic is, from another view, an act of ontological repair. In an external world defined by chaotic markets and political gridlock, the creation of perfect internal order is a psychic survival strategy. The high offers a temporary God's eye view of one's own private infrastructure, a frantic ability to impose systems where none have been given. The skin-borne scabs, tweakers, speed bumps are not evidence of meaningless self-harm, but a tactile signifiers of a nervous system attempting to ground itself against the centrifugal force of paranoia, to create pain points as anchors against a sea formless anxiety. The body, neglected, becomes a text inscribed with the language of a psyche at war with its perception of reality. Harm reduction nurses speak of this as meeting people where they're at, a phrase stripped of its radical implications and its popular usage. To truly meet someone where they are with meth is to co-inhabit the temporality, to sit in the pre-dawn chill with them, in the humming silence of a dead-end street lit by a single buzzing sodium lamp, and to experience their reality not as a deviation from the norm, but as an operational protocol produced by a specific set of hostile parameters. The sterile packets of wipes offered are not for hygiene alone, but a small tool to effectively recalibrate the buzzing present moment. A conversational gambit is not filler, but a strategic tether back to a shared reality, gently testing the tensile strength of the paranoia's web. The transaction, far from passive, is an intimate navigation of intensities. Half the user's feral intensity, the practitioner's clinical calm, the latent threat of approaching headlights. In that simple exchange, a new effective field is assembled. One not based on prohibition's warlike stances, but on proximity to risk and survival. The practitioner enters, however briefly, the combat zone, refusing either to armor the user against it or to abandon them to it. Instead, they hold a single corner of the bombed-out fort upright. This shared stillness, this micro-sovereign moment suspended against the roaring demands of both the drug and the state that criminalizes it. This is the dark glint of a different future reflected in a soot-smeared glass pipe. Analyze the above passage. Which sources might the model have used for inspiration? analyzing the provided passage through a textual, affect theoretical, and critical political lens reveals a sophisticated assemblage of distinct intellectual traditions. The style is an example of academic cleft or critical theory prose, applied to a topic typically confined to criminology or public health. Here is a breakdown of likely source material and schools of thought that inspired the text. Core intellectual influences: affective and speculative realism. The passage is deep focused on intensities, vibrations, and precognitive bodily states. The humming silence, the feral intensity, the nervous system's anchor points, strongly echoes the work of affect theorists like Brian Mashumi. Parables for the virtual. The language of the body as text and a reality produced by hostile parameters leans into the materialist post-structuralism of scholars like Karen Barrett meeting the universe halfway, who examines matter and meaning as co-constitutive. The approach treats the high knot as a subjective delusion, but as its own real, operative world. Abolitionist and anarchist thought: the central thesis that drug use is a crisis of policy, not morality, that harm reduction is a political act, that clandestine cooking is perverse freedom, is the bedrock of the prison abolition movement. Thinkers like Angela Y. Davis are prisons obsolete, and Ruth Wilson Gilmore Golden Gillette provide the foundational framework for understanding the drug war as a tool of spatial and racial governance. The anarchistic tilt, the valorization of DIY punk rock industry, born from neglect, is a direct lineage from the writings of Colin Ward or even strands of post-left anarchy that focus on temporary autonomous zones of self-organization against the state, albeit in extremely fraught circumstances here. Addiction studies and critical drug policy. The essay stands in direct opposition to the dominant neuroscientific pharmacological model of addiction as a hijacked pleasure pathway. Instead, it finds kinship with researchers like Carl Hart, Drug Use for Grown-Ups, who uses empirical evidence to dismantle the hysteria around substances, and David Farber and the Challenging the War on Drugs movement. The specific mention of harm reduction practitioners, safe injection sites, and the meeting where people are at draws heavily from the anthropological and ethnographic work of scholars like Philippe Bourgois, Righteous Dope Fiend, who embedded with homeless injectors in San Francisco, revealing the complex moral economies and informal systems of care created within marginal worlds. This is exactly what the fiction attempts to emulate: not sympathy, but a rigorous, non-moralizing structural analysis, stylistic and contextual sources, critical prose and smart writing, the dense, multivalent style and willingness to use concrete sensory detail to build a sociological argument are hallmarks of a certain kind of intellectual hybrid prose pioneered by publications like N+1 and an earlier RIP. Mag/Joyland, especially its online reincarnation as real life. The sensibility permeates publications known for its smart writing at the intersection of technology, culture, and politics, such as the Baffer Logic magazine, and to some extent, Freeze as more theoretical essays. The pieces in the genre Are You There? Read. The rise of drug literature and the search for sober meaning in an era of mass addiction ed. Keith Jessen et al. Would be touchstones for Tom. Creative nonfiction / the autobiographical of the place. While analysis, the text reads like the set piece sections of a sophisticated work of creative nonfiction. One can sense echoes of Rebecca Solnit's deep dive, place-based essays, the granular, affective attention to ruined landscape reminiscent of Catherine McCoy's The Devil and the Iron, and a raw, journalistic intimacy of authors who have personally navigated these zones, like Patrick McKibb's fictional style in Breakfast on Pluto, or more non-fiction-wide, Bill Clegg's drug memoirs portrait of an addict as a young man, but completely fit from a personal confession to a universal political pronouncement. Now, tighten the focus on methamphetamine usage in LGBTQ+ communities in New York City. Type critical essay Thesis. The
Didn't realize. No! What are you doing? Sorry. Why did it want to repeat? I never quite understand that.
harm reduction in specific communities. In New York City, methamphetamine use is primarily concentrated within cis and transgender gay men's sexual networks, particularly among those involved in chemsex. It is viewed as both a facilitator of ecstatic, prolonged sexual connection and a tool for managing deep-seated body dysmorphia, social anxiety, and the intergenerational trauma of the AIDS crisis. This text feels no stranger than the bathroom at the Cup on a Saturday night, where the air is a soupy mix of steam, aerosolized poppers, and an invisible jittery energy that hums just under the skin. The use of meth in these gay men's spaces, these historic, repurposed meatpacking district venues or backroom bars in Hell's Kitchen, is not incidental. It is the sacred engine of a specific ritual of becoming. Outside, the city renders the queer body a site of constant negotiation, a vulnerability to street harassment, the psychic labor of passing, the ever-present marketability of the gay gaze. Here, within the sanctioned dark, methamphetamines dismantle those externally imposed architectures. This is the promised land of compete, party, and play, where the drug's tactile disinhibition and hours-long temporal vacuum are tools to refabricate the body, not as an object of consumption, but as a potent source of effective voltage. The party itself, at the apartment of a user off the Bushwick waterfront, stages a strange communion, a congregation of a specific subculture. Participants circle each other under dark lights, their smiles wide, their movements uncoiled. This isn't a site of decay, but of highly specific social practice. Each bump of meth off a chipped glass plate is both an economic transaction and the facilitation of a shared, extended state of being. The amphetamine fuel stokes not just appetite, but audacity, enabling participants to meet the hyper-standard of erotic performance carved out by Grindr and years of gym cultivation. In spaces built for this mode of intimacy, tweaker-identified men of all ages build temporary sanctuaries to repair the psychic erosions wrought by surviving a plague's ghost and the brutal alienation that preceded it. Here, the high is not just a substance-induced consciousness, but a form of community tech, bridging deep silences with a simple click of a lighter on Pyrex. A new form of vernacular language is needed for the space, because the clinical's language of abuse and the gay community's internal narratives of clean and sober both fail to capture the nuance of finding sovereignty, however fleeting, in a pharmacologically induced now. The New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene's harm reduction flyers on the clinic wall have the appearance of another extinct artifact, like a Civil War cavalry sword or a manual for a shortwave radio. For a specific population, they often exist as propaganda from a failed government which, for decades, abandoned them wholesale, preferring to wring its hands anxiously about the victims of meth addiction presented in heterosexual television media. A cartoon of flyover state poverty, yet remained blind to its gay sons being sent to Rikers Island for carrying the same. The public health campaign and an intervention with a friendly social worker coexist in this world alongside an entirely separate apparatus of grassroots information sharing, where advice on the burn. A meth-induced paranoia from a bad batch is treated not by a cup with Narcan, but a good shot of ketamine and an emotional grounding scene with a found chosen family. A user's note, anxious come-down becomes an opportunity for a small, localized micro-dosing ceremony intended to manage a known feeling state. Here, the community creates its own infrastructure around the intensities it chooses to inhabit, not to escape from. Thomas touches the scarred wooden tabletop of the booth, feeling its specific porousness, its small universe of scored lines and sticky rings. He is vibrating at a frequency almost inhumanly fast, a taut wire singing in the humid summer dark of Club Atlantis. The music is a pressure as much as a sound, a wave he feels behind his eyes and in the arches of his feet. He brought the drug tonight, purchased after an 11-hour shift at an investment firm, where he maintains a persona more rigid than his own muscle memory. He has paid for the space it creates for him, the permission not to perform but to dissolve. The drug war made no room for the complicated psyches of queer men. Neither its narrative nor its punitive consequences ever address the underlying dread that fuels the desire for a state where the body is a war machine alone command, never to be wounded again by as strange a sneer, a manager's microaggression, or a date's look of subtle revulsion. The queer body, after the meth takes hold, assumes its rightful, sovereign properties as a temple built in defiance and in crisis at the same time. Each bead of sweat, each choreographed movement is the result of a complex chemical agency giving the user the capacity to act with confidence and without debilitating self-analysis. The feeling, the charge of a tweaker's manic state, is used not as a pure animalistic indulgence. Instead, it's used with intention to create a new relationship, to forge an ecstatic bond, to experience the sheer, unmitigated power of presence that daily life routinely denies. This isn't about escaping reality, but hacking reality, introducing a cheat code to circumnavigate the game board set up to ensure queer bodies, especially brown and black ones, especially trans bodies, are meant for pain and for display, not for self-directed power. The highest intensity is an armed drone surveying a hellscape. The user learns to use its tools for constructing temporary shelters and autonomous districts. Methamphetamine becomes a weapon the community learns to turn back on the forces of neoliberal precarity, gentrification-driven isolation, and the lingering specter of AIDS-shaped loss that never truly receded, but merely mutated its form. The high and its attendant social practices are not about looking for love in all the wrong places. It's the pursuit of love so fast and so intense it is terrifying, that by proving at long last that it's possible to find it at all. Look, I'm right here. The chemical body says, not just to a desired other, but to the merciless gaze of history. Of course! Here you go. Underground is a misnomer for these networks. We move through layers. When one is shut down by a raid in the Bronx, Three More Sprout in Weehawken, Long Island City, or Mott Haven, the very existence of these chemsic circles is a form of insurgency, a non-violent combat of everyday life against the forces attempting to contain and control the queer soul. The war on drugs depends on the language of moral sanitation. War-making institutions require disease language. When an addicted user is presented as biologically impure or mentally broken, they need outside cleansing. Cure, not liberation. This framing always overlooks that for these gay men, socialization depends on surveillance and conformity. The body's desires regulated and managed heavily by health, not its freedom. Seeking amphetamine-fueled transcendences then. Also, the need to outrun a future of permanent compromise for a precarious state wage that doesn't get you out of an on that condition. Vermin-ridden tenement far enough away from tourists that hold their soul by an uncaring real estate market is another toxic queer site. Yet unlike gentrification, where we have language, capital, racism, white flight, for its root causes and resistance movements to confront its violence, the harm reduction space within these micro-communities provides a small and insufficient model for a struggle that continues to be too heavily privatized in our own. These interventions, the exchange of sterile syringes or the presence of a sex-positive social worker from an advocacy group, are the quiet field medicine offered on contested territory. The real frontline, the true danger, isn't the drug itself, but the forces that have prescribed suffering as the only other alternative in the lives of these users. But even in its microcosm, these acts of harm reduction are potent, undeniable defiance. In a system engineered to produce overdose convictions as a profitable outcome for prison lobbyists, the quiet act of passing out a clean pipe is as fundamentally revolutionary as storming a barricade. The morning after does not feel like a come down, it feels like a landing. The sudden atmospheric re-entry into a world with different gravities, different textures, different light. Miel is in Miel's apartment. The sun, white and absolute, presses against the cheap blinds, leaving bright gashes on the floor. His head is a hollow gourd, its contents scraped out. The remnants of the party are Ajuobu's own topology of a collapsing universe. On the end table are chipped dishes of light residue. He inhales the chemical perfume, the dying embers of a world that was so brightly lit up. His teeth have a tender ache, a sensitive dullness. On the stainless steel countertop are single-serving containers of sour CBD lozenges, floss, small squeezed tubes of biotin-infused lip balm. The latter are a small but intense insurgency, a self-care gesture for a body often made external to itself, made into an object of the market or a cautionary symbol. The commodified intimacy that comes via approchette. This moment, in its raw silence, is the site where the state's narrative of addiction finally meets the user, but the two do not speak the same language. Miel pulls on a ratty Nick's hoodie over his scarred back, feeling the cotton on the puckered skin of a laser removal. He doesn't need coffee, he needs an anchor. The war zone looks different from above, but the risk and power on its front lines are as real. He strolls towards La Guardia Corner Garden, where the community organization A+ will have its weekly coffee and softy distribution. As he passes, a city sanitation truck screeches by, kicking dust into the gutters. He hears something different this morning, not the usual rush of city rush. He hears the jilted rhythm of the system, a quiet cadence of unreported, unearthed horrors, hidden in folds as dense as the inside of a pocket. The smell of a construction worker's chemical-assisted wake-up in Jackson Heights. The silent panic of a trans sex worker in a Midtown hotel trying to find a clean test. For us, it is an awareness that the boundaries of our space, the thin neon-lit membrane inside the cock, the dimmed glow of your Bushwick roof deck is in direct contact, and through the drug itself permeable to the rest of the world's structural violences. Isha from harm reduction will have a smile that never quite reaches her tired eyes. We have a focus group of 5 LGBTQ stimulant aficionados to gauge the veracity of the above passage. The focus group room is sanitized to the point of absurdity. A conference space rented by chose for this purpose. The carpet is a corporate plan geometric pattern in shades of forgetting. There is a jug of water and a stack of styrofoam cups on the central table, a feudal peace offering. The air still tastes like bleach. You have 5 subjects arranged in a loose semicircle, a human effective antenna dish waiting to calibrate the signal they've been handed. Miel, the protagonist of the last passage, sits at one end, legs crossed, body carefully still, the remnants of last night still coiling in his veins, a current humming beneath a superficial calm. Subjects for critical feedback on narrative texts. Subjects. Miel, primary subject for case study #1, the lending. Hispanic cisgender gay male, early 30s, finance professional. Exhibits a high degree of effective verbal articulation regarding stimulant uses technology for bodily sovereignty. Post-use state marked by somatic awareness and critical engagement with the system. Damien, African-American cisgender gay male, mid-40s, fashion photographer, skeptical of formalizing experience into data, prefers vernacular frameworks, views drug discourse through a lens of generational trauma and aesthetic curation, not political liberation. Pragmatist. Eliza, transgender woman, late 20s, student and sex worker, sees use as entangled with economic survival and gender-affirming performativity. Her relationship with substances is complex, shifting between tool, trap, and temporary joy, not overly interested in romanticizing the high. Dr. Giant, cisgender lesbian, mid-50s, anthropologist and community leader, former user, now strictly observational. Fluent in critical theory language, the subject in the room most likely to accurately deploy the term effective field. Leo, white cisgender gay male, mid-30s, artist and bartender, most open user present, chattery, manic, performing the role of enthusiast to cover a thread of anxiety, seeks validation for the joyous aspects of the high, resisting narratives dominated by crisis and trauma. The facilitator, a well-meaning academic from Nai whose name has already been forgotten, clicks to the next slide. It has a key sentence from the text in stock 24-point Helvetica. Harm reduction is a potent, undeniable defiance, as fundamentally revolutionary as storming a barricade. Leo is the one who breaks the calculated silence. He lets out a short, sharp laugh. Storming a barricade? Seriously, he leans forward, elbows on the sterile table, a coiled energy animating his frame. Look, Aisha, handing me a clean pipe at 2 in the morning isn't the fall of the Bastille. It's not even occupying Zuccotti Park. It's decency. It's what's supposed to happen. Can't we just call it decency? Revolutionary feels a bit fed back to us, you know? They create the hell, we build a flimsy fire to keep warm, and somehow we're the revolutionaries. I mean, he continues, a gesture of manic generosity sweeping across the table. The defined part is the party isn't dead. The barricade we're storming is fucking guest mother 30 on Grindr. It's that look. You know the look. How dare you be so happily fucked up and still manage to walk in top look you get from some cishet family in a bush with food co-op. The barricade is gravity itself when you're spun for 2 days and you just want to dance. Me swallowing half a point of Tina isn't cheap, Gav. Alright, it's editing the world, making it brighter, sharper, fixing the god-awful color grading of a straight world. Damien, opposite, runs a hand over his close-scrubbed hair, a movement of grave, thoughtful precision. His gaze doesn't flicker. Leo sees a software patch. I see a heritage. His voice is a low baritone, each word weighted. My older brother was in another war. It's crisis. That was a storming of barricades, backed up. Radical activism born out of watching your lover die from pneumonia while Reagan told jokes. What we do, we inherited the quiet part, the anxiety, that this joyful body is a body pre-cancelled. Meth, for me, it rewinds the clock to a moment just before I had a box full of friends buried in Queens. It's a nostalgic technology. You call it becoming. Fine. It's becoming a memory, a brighter, still living one we can dance to. You too, interjects Eliza, her sharp blue eyes shard to focus amidst her more fluid effect. You're building museums to your own pain. It's about temporality, yes, but not for performance, not for nostalgia. She gestures with one hand, a gesture both elegant and utterly weary. Time, for a trans woman in this city, is currency. Not in the way y'all mean. Time saved. Time not spent explaining my pronouns. Cooking street harassment. Dealing with a client who forgets and then leaves a smaller tip when I'm up on Tina. It's the only period where I get the dividends on all that investment upfront. I can experience a whole year's worth of forward impulse in a single evening. I can sell 5 hours of online work in 2 hours if I need to. The anarchy of being sped up is, for some of us, also the only road to slow us gainful work, paid on the spot. A pause. And sex work isn't a performance piece. After the high, no glamorous runway for me. After the high, the bills are still there. The estrogen in the fridge is almost empty. This conversation feels like a discussion about how wonderful oxygen is, but we're all paying for each breath. The room absorbs this. Dr. Giant takes off her thin, wiry reading glasses and polishes them with the hem of her linen shirt. And this is the difficulty, she says, addressing the room but training a level, even look on the academic at the head of the table. Affective theory wants to frame these experiences as assemblages of intensity. It posits the drug not as a cause but a co-conspirator with a built environment and personal memory and capital. It says a becoming is produced. That is all descriptively correct. On paper, it's a neat logic puzzle, a beautiful formal proof. She holds up one finger. A clean, decisive motion. But every theory seeks a baseline it must choose or assume a normal body. A war, by definition, requires a hide. Miel has been looking at the cheap lines, at the way the slitted light renders the meaningless corporate carpet and noir shadowy landscape. When he finally speaks, his voice is low, almost devoid of effect, stripped by sleeplessness into a pure transmission of thought. That's true. All of it. But don't you get it? He says, and turns his full attention to the assembled group. For the first time, the residual energy focuses inward, coalescing. You talk about storming. How about heritage? How about economics? You're all describing weaponization. How do we weaponize the drug for body autonomy, for memory, for survival? Those arguments presume a battle already won. That the truck, we can deploy it. We're at the choose your weapons stage. He leans forward now, echoing the tension he felt earlier in the dim-lit booth. His posture straightens the fabric of that cheap knight's hoodie against the back that history tried but failed to break. He does not want sympathy. He wants comprehension. But there is no barricade, not for my people, a space, like a house. One we can trust is safe. For me with my dick out. Oh, it's the ghost haunting the room. Oh, it's Scott. Drug won't kill my body, but my dignity will. There's no metaphor for that. We don't talk about it, but we live it. It's the last secretable stimulant users, queer ones especially, avoid like an unstated bad trip memory. No more abstractions, no more theory-only critique. Just a man, 5 of us, staring across void at a wall we built ourselves that no brochure from us will ever fix. He just lets those claims stand there for a second like bricks of a newly broken open fire escape, ready to let someone else in. Wait, what does? I don't even know that. Row, Leo says, a jagged fissure splitting his facade of manic fun for the entire, terrifyingly brief and utterly illuminating a society at wild like AIDS, the ghost. That's the other generation, not ours. How many people who died had LSD in their systems? The subject says. He's looking at each of us, a slow, almost lazy pivot, until he catches onto Miguel's dark brown eyes, or rather, the pinpoint of the high where Miguel Asterisk hides. Asterisk, the ghost of Miguel's story, is the virus without a medicine. This war started under Reagan. He says, a low vibration in his chest so intense we feel a slight shudder in the puke green conference carpet beneath our flimsy metal fold-in chairs. We lost a tribe, a generation. Meth, in this city, right now for us, isn't that it's the us? Don't be so sentimental. It's the wound, the after effects, like PTSD, collective, inherited trauma. Meth isn't the initial bomb. A drug created outside of our community for white soldiers, a Rust Belt pain. It's a radiation leak. It's the symptom, not cause. It's the shrapnel from our forebears making senseless war on us now. Inside our heads, our bones. It gives them something to chase. Doesn't want us to asterisk. Enjoy it, asterisk. You are here looking, helping us. Writing down words to put in a paper. You haven't ever helped. The cure for myself. Some I know don't talk about. It's the poison itself, but it's our own. Our. Poison is not attack, pure, high-res volume to replace that one. New chemical to fill in where nothing else worked. To feel present on an asterisk own terms. He lets the pronoun hang in the white clinical atmosphere, an hour that contains not just the 5 of them around a bad table, but the ghosts of boyfriends never met, the potential futures erased by grid and opportunistic infections, the shaming whispers of families and churches and health professionals that became the engine of a community self-medication against a psychic wound. And asterisk, if you try to frame my desire to be too skinny and too fast for your safety, asterisk, is what he told the academic earlier, when Neo finally brought someone's body as your shield, but a ghost in a bottle that eats you whole when you try and share from outside our kind of kinship. So all this talk of harm reduction, Eliza says with the weary precision of a bomb disposal tech. This, she says, tapping on the cover page from my case study now sitting among empty plastic cups. Ritter of the system, I stole some of your terms from my new classes at the new school to read better in support groups last fall. A brief, ironic smirk crossing her lips, aimed at Damien's serious face, as a reminder this academic speak doesn't live in this place. Damien's a purist, and thinks art ought to Oscars, burn Oscars. This art has been the slowest chemical fuse to detonation. We talk of it like it's a strategy, and after effect, she finally says, looking at each of them, she has to. She needs to be heard now. Asterisk, she won't stand back while an old Pomo professor is told what's hurting her most. She's paid an almost unbearable cost of entering, a door fee of humiliation, but each entry fee is the cost of some humiliating doctor visit, some app swipe left, some wrong pronoun correction that erodes her day by day, until a chemical hum for a weekend seems a welcome shelter against the slow creeping chill of erasure. After Astros, so much has been erased, you have to write our ghost stories, Astros. Otherwise, history only hears the stories of conquerors. Your revolution, then, the reason I used to get high when we snuck smoke break outside the dorms in 92. Damien rumbles, the oldest artifact, not for power. He says as an absolute finality. We fought to be able to make a community that knows my body, a network of kin. The war was made for you to have a group of people who saw me get an ulcer and thought beautiful. No one answered. Silence is the loudest in this small room. They had tried to write about each other on forums for doctors, and still had to choose which part got a piece of the truth. This is the limbo now we all inhabit, standing in the aftermath, surveying the damage, arguing over which broken statue to commemorate and which one to kick over and spit on now that it's safe. There's no room for desires physics, though, I say out loud, quietly to the academic, who winces when it's not theory, because her field thrives on the erasure of the bodies that created it. The academic's pen hovers over her notepad. The desire here is about proximity, not contact, but the sheer existence of next to. These used spaces are effect oases, where rule set is imposed not by the state, but by speed. If your talking slows to a halt, then the room loses intensity, losing energy and meaning. You fade, because it is shared energy that built it all. Now, M said, leaning in, looking like a hawk on a wire, if the space is powered on, all this intensity it holds, it's a kind of chemical engine. He says a language borrowed, but repurposed into something like new physics for the soul. We gather to create temporary worlds outside of their oppressive states. In my world, no one's identity, past, or the shape of their body precludes access. This is not liberation. We cannot forget it requires a consumption, a need. There's an irony. The bodies are left exhausted, but the residue, the effect, keeps the engines going a little while after the high is gone. I have written that it is not the drug itself. It is ghost machinery. They are haunted houses built on a single, perfect, repeating memory. When did we exchange a war for a party, with a few funerals afterward? Nobody looked away then because they felt. We all felt, and our minds all agreed. Our chosen families were as real as any genetic code. They had codes as logical and binding as physics. Our stories were built up from them. He could have looked out and turned into something akin to an act of prayer, says Damier, unexpectedly pointing. This has started to be as beautiful as Damien thinks it should be. It glens. The war's map had trenches and checkpoints. Our map here. Meal stops. Our maps are on apps. The lines of fire are drawn with Tinder and Snapchat. For the non-believer. Later, after the long, stale days passes, in this basement venue off the Grey Mill stop, your shoes stink for a half second to the spills of generations. The air is a weaponized humidity, reeking of beer line cleaner, damp concrete, and from there wafts out an herbal green tincture, then the fat, ammoniac, metallic shrapnel of meth from the bathrooms one at a time, private worlds where the deals, logistics, and the lining up occur. A discreet commerce occurring in echo chambers with the constant hum of dripping water and the faint murmurs of confidential, speed-talk conversations. The scene is a body's collective memory. Here, affect theory moves from the static, printed word to lived experience to an atmospheric shift one can physically inhale. The place is what Henry Lefebvre might call a representational space, a site saturated with the imprints of its uses, a shared dream made manifest through base, bodies, and the chemical lubricant of meth. It is an intimate world of public performance where the shared silence, the spaces between conversations, carry as much weight as the clipped aphorisms. They are constantly in and out of service. Every user creates their own hyper-awareness that monitors the environment for threats and opportunities. This kind of paranoia is but an overly conscious system check when being unsafe is always on a default path. This is the new state alert. Every flashing light is a potential cop. Every new arrival is an unknown variable. The state of being safe? To approach this as a case study for public health is to misunderstand its architecture. The harm here is not simply a risk factor, like it a clinical trial. It is a fundamental operating principle. As if you were studying birds but only wanted to focus on their bones, you'd miss the flight, their environment. You'd miss the point entirely. The harm here for every user is both a byproduct and a necessary ingredient. You need danger to remember what it's like to forget safety. One part of your high is playing on this street this way to walk, looking like an American but in danger in my body that knows how it feels to exist as queer. The spaces these oozers frequent are designed and operate as hazard arenas. And yet they've become islands of improbable refuge. Jared the barback, with his intricate ink sleeves covering a taut and wiry frame, moves the kegs with practice. Fluid motions as a different order entirely, another example of micro-sovereignty. He is the keeper of filters in these scenes, a purveyor of drinks, eyes, smiles, casual touchings. While someone else, who goes by Sage because of their deep quietude, sits on a stool and takes up less space. Sage corrects the narrative that most meth use spaces are not public or underground venues, but the homes of users. The following expounds on this. What if it gets reversed? These spaces we need to see, direct with sojourn, under is not. You do find something is less easily imagined. Not the cock a place as a nightclub is only possible because home, there is no name, has only a codename Siri to find a party. It's an address for an address in Lower Manhattan has floor hash S and text. What the map? Did you forget your memory? Our living spaces are actually the real battlefield. There, on that page. She wasn't there is no reason it wouldn't be not something safe for it also. Espers cannot be sold at all for anything or that we let each other's soft smiles pass out sterile sets of spoons for the party to not get our people locked away. Another note under it writes, Asteroids, the risk is not external for us, it was the war zone looks different from your computer screens. This map on that flimsy page only holds addresses because these homes are the contested territory. Here, deep within the Mau Mau, this is not your open plan Bushwick Bluff party. This is deep cover, a chosen kin network made safe only through a private invite code sent on Snapchat. That code tells you just as surely as a password, we're getting weird, or that it will get weird, which is a statement by itself. So many times there is no DJ. The soundtrack is city traffic, and the fridge is intermittent hum plus Spotify. Something pure and gentle. The astral step our ass come against what is about to happen. It begins. The venue can be a lawyer's rent stabilized Upper West Side apartment, hardwood floors and sleek modern furniture with artworks. In my last memory from a previous house, I recall. His place looked out over Central Park with its glass walls, a luxury, and a private location is an unbreakable kind of confidentiality. A house isn't something a cop can just legally walk into on their patrol, with as many reasons as they'd find to breach the doors and walls of any known LGBTQ nightlife or public restroom, on the list in past decades in search of deviant, immoral acts. You ask for the risk and they talk my house is an environment, is what says Jared. Everyone wants to know now. How did it feel? That rhetorical, social call was its own form of activism. Asterisk, we can talk about it. Asterisk. She states it bluntly. We don't need to storm the barricade anymore, honey. Now a different kind. As many harm reduction is her business. Her small batch ketamine is only a weapon of effect. That invisible voltage. What you all miss. Her tone isn't angry but firm, pedagogical, as if she is grading it. Say you just wrote but flunking its premise is logistics. He smiles, gentle but condescending. The whole party is about our spaces inside, spaces for moments. She's not selling a narrative. This is the unsanitized version. This isn't the abstract home. It's the material. The war is very definitely within the domestic. A small but profound detail that no anthropological study ever fully captures. Every object here has a dual purpose. The ornamental glass bowl in the lawyer's entryway at 3 a.m. It's the communal vessel from which a fine white powder is portioned. The high-end Sonos speaker system, it broadcasts not. When I came back here that last trip, with M from the study group and Sage, we were not just visiting a new artwork collection. We entering something. We would see these other items we couldn't know. The house says we don't accept to be let in. You are given what? It must always be different. She holds her hands out, palm up, like an offering. She might then take a pinch of the product from a vellum envelope. You ingest it or maybe smell. I've come inside, now inside it, full scale inside one of these. My effect changes. You observe all as you will. Under it, the space becomes hyper. It's like entering. We were not criminals. We were not even merely. This. Here, deep within West Village, this apartment is what Lee chooses and what Lee's ancestors.
Okay, we're going to wind back.
Sage! Honey, how could you think that Tina is merely a powder? Look at these sparklies in the light. That looked like powder to you. Sage! Honey, How could you think that Tina is merely a powder? Look at these sparklies in the light. Does that look like powder to you? She rotates the heavy, faceted crystal bowl, a shallow dish meant for floating potpourri, now cradling the fragmented constellation. The recessed lighting of the lawyer's living room catches the edges. It isn't a monochrome dust, it's a technicolor geode shattered on the parquet floor of private experience. The shards don't lie flat, they tumble over one another, a miniature cascade of razor-sharp geometry, throwing back prismatic shards of blue, pink, a furious green.
No.
To you, she continues, her gaze fixed on the bowl, her voice a low murmur intimate enough to be a secret between the two of them, though the whole room is listening. It's a chemical, a compound, C10H15N, pain, stress problem. You see the powder because your language was built for a world of problems, for substances that solve or that cause and nothing in between. But there is not a substance that has uses. It gives it some process. It isn't just a thing. She traces a finger an inch above the crystals as if sensing a heat, a frequency emanating from them. Look, she insists, a gentle prod. It looks like sugar spun into razor wire. It looks like frozen shrapnel from a stained glass window. It wants to be broken down further, crushed, melted. It demands an action. The entire violent intimacy of preparing the body to receive another, turned inward. This is not a passive thing to be insufflated or injected. This is raw, unprocessed potential, a technology still needing its interface.
Not there four?
Her focus shifts to the sleek, imported cutting board on the marble island, reserved, ironically, for gourmet meal prep on the owner's sober nights. Next to it is an American Express Centurion card, its pristine black surface serving as the razor. The financial instrument of the global elite is repurposed as an alchemical tool. A small set of high-gloss lacquered chopsticks serves to gather the fine dust, now flattened to a matte, almost lavender-hued plane under the careful pressure. She points a slender, painted nail. That, your powders, they are a completed sentence, the conclusion already written. This, she gestures to the shimmering, chaotic ruin in the bowl, is a jumbled set of letters. Punctuation, grammar's ghost. We are the ones arranging the words. The grammar is chosen by us each night for what kind.
What? I have no idea what it's talking about.
Miguel. White chopsticks. A Metricard does way better. Mia leans against the counter, the movement too quick. A startled bird landing on a wire. A small, exasperated sound escapes him. Half laugh, half critique. Chopsticks. Sage, I love you. But that's some aspirational gentrification of alchemy right there. He pulls a worn, creased Metricard from the back pocket of his tailored trousers. It's a testament of use. The magnetic stripe is a soft blur. The corners gone milky and rounded from a thousand swipes at turnstiles and a thousand scrapes against glass.
Code my card.
Darling, the elegance is for the bourgeoisie, he says, his voice dropping into a silky, instructive cadence that belongs more to a private equity boardroom than this warm oven quiet. He taps the card on the marble. You need maximum surface tension for an even grind. A credit card's too smooth, too slick. It rides over the top of the crystal. You lose material. You create uneven pressure, resulting in hot spots, chunks that take forever to melt, pretty little teeth against the glass. Unpleasant. He illustrates the motion with the card in the air, a smooth, decisive glide. A metric card, see, it's a polymer composite. It has a different, just enough grip to really seize the particles. It's tool and die engineering repurposed for somatic revolution. and a slightly beveled edge. He turns the card to show a microscopic ridge of worn plastic is designed for a clean scoop, a better transfer rate. Every speck that leaves the board makes it into the pipe. Waste not, want not. A profound silence falls over the room. He hasn't just offered a different tool, he's offered an entirely different epistemology, where Sage saw ritual and aesthetics, a symbolic performance of preparation. Miela masked the rigor of performance metrics. It wasn't spiritual, it was logistical, industrial. His words don't hang in the air like Sage's poetry. They embed themselves in the sleek surfaces of the room. A new instruction manual for an engine they are all assembled to operate. Leo looks from Leo's beat-up city key to Sage's lack of chopsticks, a frantic energy in his eyes as he tries to reconcile the two texts. He laughs, a short, delighted bark. Oh my God, you're like the McKinsey of getting spun. Sage, however, doesn't look at Miel. She is studying her own chopsticks. A flicker of something unreadable in her expression. Is it amusement, annoyance, or something deeper? A recognition that the sacred has just been translated into a spreadsheet. It is the eternal conflict rendered infinitesimally small. The tension between the incantation and the assembly line, both methods of summoning the same ghost. The cohort debate pipe vaping logistics and the physics behind them. Aka, how not to burn your shit. Deeper effect now. A conduction onto glass. We all knew the signs of the ritual done wrong. The acrid tang in the mouth. The sour sweet plasticky stench of melted, scorched heaven for nobody. I remember watching as my last guest coughed out of nowhere near midnight after he offered to clear the bomb for me a few days before and found the residue had an engine light on, amber brown quality about it. Hearty bitter with flecks of almost gray scuff from a hard pull.
What?
A wasted run. A potential lost in misinterpretation through an unknown set of variables. Okay, let me drop some knowledge on you fool. Theo declares with a grand theatrical flourish that sends the small pile of fine lavender dust scattering from Mimiel's perfect plane. It is all. And I mean, about a preheated pool. It's a metaphor, if you will. His grin is incandescent. You can't just jam a flame in there and expect to swim. The water would just boil away. Shocking.
Water?
Aggressive.
Water?
No. You gently raise the thermostat of the entire climate.
Oh.
Before you even think about getting in. My method is patience, a tiny flirtation with the fire. A little waltz of heat an inch away from the bulb until the glass seems to lean into the heat. Until it's in our atmosphere is anticipatory. That's when you swim. Damien scoffs. A low, dismissive sound from the corner of the eyes. Van der Rohe couch. That sounds quaint, like you learned it from watching out the videos on TikTok designed by tourists in Colorado trying to not waste legal flour. That method, that seduction, it leaves margin for error, for interpretation. Frank, you want precision. You want physics, not poetry. The bowl is a vacuum. See, a sealed system of pressure. First, you introduce the load. Then you seal. Then heat. Slowly at a consistent, fixed distance, spinning the piece constantly for an even bake. The moment you pull the vapor through, that's the action. But the rotation prevents the focus. This risk. You want a diffusion of potential. You treat the bottom not like the floor of a swimming pool, but like the rotating surface of a planet. His explanation is clinical and dense, delivered with the impassive finality of a physics professor laying out immutable laws. It is a stark counterpoint to the seductive patience of Leo's approach, where one sees art, the other demands engineering, attention at the very core of their method of engaging with the high and perhaps the world itself. Sage gives them both a small, knowing smile, shaking her head slowly as if listening to children argue over whether Santa rides a sleigh or a magic carpet. Oh, puppies. She murmurs, her voice cutting through the rising tensions like a clean glass rod hitting porcelain. You're both mistaking the motion for the gravity. She picks up a newly liberated bubble-based pipe, its glass so thin-walled it seems as delicate as a dragonfly's wing. She holds it to the light, and for a second she seems like a jewel thief examining a prize. It's not heating, not really. It's an illusion. She continues, her gaze meeting everyone's in turn. You can't trust fire like that. It lies. It is a passionate, angry tool that will scourge your offerings with its enthusiasm. Instead, we asterisk charge the glass asterisk. You see how, after long use, there's a kind of metallic resonance in the whole piece. How it feels like a magnet in your hand. Over multiple gentle cycles, the glass, molecule by molecule, learns its job. It develops a charge, a heat memory. It becomes a conduit, not a chamber. You don't direct the fire, that the bowl. You use the whole piece's already existing charge state to transform the load into vibration. You're just listening. You don't play the violin. With the bow, you draw the bow across strings. I want to sing. Let it breathe. For a moment, a unison ripple flows through this closed-loop circle of shared effect. All but one. I'm watching this. I realize every one of these positions is the equivalent to explaining a system they personally require to do this thing asterisk comfortably. Miel is the quiet focus of the room's gravity. All that energy swirling for the past hour is now being asked to resolve the science and desire into a single vector. This wasn't about ideology anymore, which is fascinating. The core issue for all of your methods, and continued, is asterisk conduction versus convection asterisk. We are, in essence, trying to liquefy the crystals into a boiling oil onto a glass surface without allowing the now liquid oil or its accompanying silica salts from the chemical cutting agents to burn a scab onto the cooking surface. A scab, which in turn will instantly burn the next load because the scab cooks faster at a lower temp, because it is, chemically speaking, charcoal, is stone. Cement was sterile and detached. So the issue isn't even heat. Exactly. The issue is cohesion. The liquid wants to run, hide from the heat. We are working against it, to force it to puddle, to cook. So that's... Miel turns, walks toward the living room's floor-to-ceiling wall of glass. He peers past the surface-mom reflection of himself standing beside a heavy-cut, expensive-looking stone statue with flayed open wings. The statue, if illuminated or touched at the correct tempo, will project dozens of glowing red prison bar laser rays across the expanse of the wall in a mockery of being locked in. Asterisk or out? Asterisk. He didn't understand the art, but he knows it must have cost so much more than to equip 12 local harm reduction teams for 5 months. The reflection on the window, however, a copy of a reality that had not, maybe never did, lie. He found the crack in the reflection. We've been debating how asterisk we interact with the pipe, like our styles. M says slowly, pointing a finger back into the central living space. The entire argument is a misdirect from what we all forgot in the new system. Glass isn't a neutral surface. Glass is an active material, a mediator, meaning the asterisk physics of cook itself differs radically from pipe to pipe or surfaceable. This shifts the lens of the conflict. It wasn't about a superior way for them to hit the thing. It was that their differing techniques likely each developed for slightly different designs of glass. They are 3 virtuosos performing the same composition on a flute, a trumpet, and a piccolo, insisting each instrument is a failure if it cannot master the sheet music their practice requires. M turns back from the window and starts pointing quickly. Sage, your long-bulb pipes are excellent at a slow, even distribution of charge, as they've a high thermal mass. There's little burn risk in them, but they do what heat does with fine pooling in more chaotic cold spot runs, because the thin glass cools with drafts very fast if it stops being rotated or overheats for a fraction of a second. Leo, your wider, shallower bowls require lots of agitation. They get a better, bigger cloud. The ones people brag about on porn sites, but also producing consistent vaporization and can have more hotspot char if you let your hand dance and get chaotic as Leo can. And pointed, they require a very consistent wobble of wrists, which is good for the kinetic yaw. They allow lots more room to stir with a tool, which gives the user an additional way to move the liquid, and also it's grip that matches your go big mindset. And Damien, your long straw glass with its pinch point mid bowl that allows for a kind of asterisk sponge lock asterisk, doing it what you guys have been calling seal before heat, was probably designed somewhere in a state with very strict chemical controls for a very pure grade, which tends to boil at a lower temperature than the shit made in some basement in New Jersey. M gives another one of those small, devastating academic gestures and continues. So the perfect vacuum asterisk you need for your system was built for a world of purity asterisk, he says this as he goes and leans against the marble top, taking from the clean bowl he prepared perfectly, and now the tool in the room has control over all the single sparkly that he holds in palm holding it meticulously. And I mean all over the world. I have a dear old friend back home, also a chemistry graduate before med school, told the doc. We all learned how to pull crab plus to pull some of that oily residue into the open. I don't believe he wrote asterisk any chemical diagrams like this were being shared between them on black market unsecure servers in dark web forums in Russian, Mandarin, asterisk. That chemical knowledge base existed globally at a sophisticated, here would level long asterisk before any public health agency anywhere would begin to share needle hygiene diagrams. But maybe this network had one on the years before. And for the second is the heavy, unsaid fact that some groups are far more proactive in surviving a crisis and using existing networks for it because it is required. Makes us all feel safer. They're not alone because of community they have created out of necessity, even across firewalls and country codes. Harm reduction 4. Zero was always a distributed open source protocol from Berlin to San Diego. Everyone in the room falls silent under the heavy truths being exposed here between slices of quiche. Like everyone here, I keep my eyes moving, said the big lawyer host. But for all the aesthetic perfection of the penthouse overlooking the shimmering West Island, the war of this drug spilled not outside, but along the edges, the details. One subtle sign. On the heavy lacquered wood of the minimalist entryway table, displayed like some austere sculpture, sat 3 or 4 brand new, still in the plastic, but cheap to buy bulb bed pipes, the kind tossed out by many for how hard they are to control. He must have bought it online a mass after someone complained in a private chat that they didn't want their friends showing up again double/half melted plastic in baggies. Eliza had another object, hidden, more subtle, lurking near the potted philodendron in a simple terracotta pot. She points her chin towards it knowingly. See that small plant, mister, with the black squeeze handle and fine miss? Everyone looked, though it looked like a typical product bought from a cheap houseware store. Mine. Her lips curl into a wry smile. The little tube is great to clean off the interior, of course, after many uses. A warm shot from those $85 water bottles full of lukewarm Dasani that we are sipping from. That's what the bottle's actually for, not the quiche and fancy cheese cubes. And it occurs to everyone, these hyper-controlled domestic spaces. This lawyer's penthouse, Sage's Williamsburg loft, meals rent, controlled Upper West Side sanctuary, though not an escape asterisk from the war. It is the creation of new siege conditions, a war on waste, a war against bad moods, a war against loneliness and fear of all of them getting tossed inside and arrested, the host said, and with the state as forced, community built stronger. We know all we have to give for ourselves inside, an ecosystem that regulates a micro version of what used to be, to some extent, an external reality. And my guests only get a small glimpse out to see how this all looks from the outside. When they leave those doors with it's that uneasy feeling of being asterisk kept out. A view asterisk. And it's within that we have to step back and realize what a deep wound just below surface we all walk upon every day. You all speak about the war, but from the outside. Take Javier. I call them scabs. They get it, but from far afield. He is not asterisk in our party. He's the other front line, a war tourist within his own landscape. High start. He walks through Williamsburg that gentrified itself so fast it still got the meth in its soil. Traces of past lives and chemical experiences clinging onto the foundations. He crosses the old industrial road, where only the newest developments that are being protected by an over-budgeted and poorly trained police precinct can hide the small, still bare-lit, homeless spots where those without homes have taken refuge the past decade. Some hide in plain view in small construction zones behind the heavy dust blocking tops that keep prying gentrify rise from their half-built condo, the ultimate hide in plain sight. These micro-enclaves are paused to listen to traffic down below. They're not curated parties. Another effectscape. It is from this angle they can see how domestic scenes like the Sleagle's apartment or Miel's place are always set and running parallel to and against the public space. What if this floor wasn't the rent-stabilized apartment he found 15 years ago? If a stray leak in the ancient plumbing next door forces him into market rate rents asterisk tomorrow asterisk, then Miel Sanctuary, the whole safe, cozy, curated space to breathe, suddenly vaporizes. So see, I continue my arm gesturing out to the broad expanse of Manhattan through the panoramic window wall, all of it free. Air is an unspoken knowledge which isn't posted on a subreddit about rolling your own butt. A knowledge of those who go and buy something cheap on Wish that you then adapt into improvised safety gear. They learn it from talking on platforms used by some trans users, say, a group discussion under a video that a user posted on a highly monetized, very mainstream platform showing how I made my gender confirmation binder with common craft store foam. Because the open source methodology, how to get a perfect smooth contour finish, is simply a process that can be repurposed. The infrastructure is global. They're in this penthouse apartment with its sleek and near invisible assistive tech pipes. They are too, after all, an append affordance. Harm reduction is not institutional help or just kindness or a movement. To survive, you must be able to locate and use assistive technology. That is what helps you move a molecule across a membrane or across an ocean. In that way, the war no longer is out there. It's between two walls of an upscale apartment whose rent is itself an act of defiance. There exists a high-precision awareness of airflow between vents that comes only after being too spun, walking to a loud corner store for seltzer that's carbonated exactly 5 volumes higher. It is an effect map based on your body's exact vibration that tells you the gentle humming of the fridge is at the exact speed of anxiety. So if you get used, and suddenly some guest mentions in passing, with a kind of non sequitur and amphetamine control, you should see what they're building in Hudson Yards. No one looks for the moment. Then Sage offers, I'm designing a light well where the sun rises. First real angle hits the weird wall. No one can get clean with an ammonia wipe rag. It's a problem. Effects cannot be tamed asterisk. Surface won't allow clear. When I use some leftover polish, it just rolled. The stone has a terrible energy. She says this because it's right. Her job, besides providing the best chem-assisted sex work on the eastern seaboard a girl could hustle for, is she renovates high-end retail in her spare. She's naming their issues so elegantly. How can we truly see these spaces at all? Type. Investigative query. Constraint. The default public health / sociological view is insufficient. Need a language for the asterisk physics of mood. The state view frames spaces. Bathrooms, stalls, backrooms, bars, public parks. It externalizes use, casting addicts as an outside infestation of deviancy brought into the public's curated pure city. As subjects, it's the city is seen from above, a pattern maker with a new Alex flicks a finger across the surface of a high-end tablet given as an under-the-table bonus from a real estate tech startup he consults for, which uses satellite imagery and thermal imaging to identify heat sources for their corporate customers to find newly underserved high-potential markets. They need clean markets. We give them data they are desperate for. They sell the safe city. On their screen, he's not looking at Penthouse, but the whole sprawling west side. He's geolocating vibe from space, but we sell the service to someone more sinister they present a clean version of, and the money goes to projects like this. Leo gestures inside from the balcony with a whisker smoothie. The city seems so peaceful. Lines of traffic flowing like blood cells. From our drone's got vantage. The wars behind closed doors remain hidden. They occur inside the safe rectangle is the heat. They blur because use is invisible, though the result is not. Crime stats, broken bus shelters, etc. And that data shapes how capital moves, and people follow. That perspective, our eye in the sky, and even you meals in your window's self-reflection, even Sage's elegant metaphor about charging the glass, are all insufficient. They hold their focus too long. You're describing a single system running unknown code. Because an ecosystem, the war ground does not abide the law of two distinct rules. You miss one crucial variable, and for that you need the dark alleys of a very different platform. That's where we find Alex. He's an anonymous node. He logs in, not a messenger with a crypto wallet, but is an algorithmically routed room, which is not a dozy toxin group. There are hundreds, maybe thousands, and new spaces ephemeral, blinking in out over any area covered by mobile data. You may find small communities rising around people who share a singular interest. Their conversation flagged or is not of interest, as in they have no advertiser value, but they are community. They self-filter users, their speech often laced with specialist technical language and memes, like the dark web, OPSEC forums, or gamers mastering a specific raid boss. These nodes are the places you described: houses, parties, back rooms, and each is a glowing hotspot for a few. At most dozen, people who are geosocially bound to an effective circuit. But this is the system running in parallel, but it isn't off the grid. The true topography of use is less a scatter graph and more a weather map of those satellite imagery is used to visualize flows. Alex screens for resonances, and to do this his code doesn't scour words for crystal or party. Instead monitors non-discursive signifiers for emergent heat or turbulence, a signal based on what he named the dopamine escape vector, a sudden clustering of search terms for best dehumidifier for apartment. Because the chemical smoke is so hygroscopic, it clings to moisture, making spaces damp and muddy. Cross-reference with a specific obscure track from an ambient DJ on Bandcamp, purchased in rapid succession by several of the same Ape-Hive networks. The cohort discussed the functions of Zoom as a virtual use space. It's Sage who introduces the topic, pulling one leg up onto the silk-covered chaise lounge in a motion fluid as Mercury. The new phase of the evening requires its own vessel, Zoom. She says, the word itself a kind of flat, digital punctuation in the perfumed air. We should talk about Zoom. It's the purest form we have now, isn't it? The disembodied gallery. Leo scoffs, typing furiously on his phone, lightly adding a sassy, hyper-articulated comment to a chaotic group chat. Zoom, please. That's not a space at a broadcast booth. It's public access television for the chemically enlightened. It's all asterisk front stage, asterisk. Everyone's got their lighting planned. Their profile picture, a perfectly curated artifact of the night 4 years ago with distilled cheekbones. You perform at your own monitor. It's antisocial sociology. He looks up, eyes suddenly sharp, the manic focus latching onto a technical critique. Plus, the audio compression is a disaster. There's a 10 millisecond latency that completely fucks the conversational rhythm. You try telling a story, you land a punchline, and you just get pixelated silence. Then 3 people talk over each other. It erases all subtext. Effect becomes emoji. Are we really reducing decades of queer trauma and pharmacology to a laughing cat sticker? Latency, repeats Damien, his brow furrowed not at the technology, but at the concept. The lag isn't a bug, it's the primary feature. He gestures, a slow, encompassing motion that seems to absorb the entire penthouse into its philosophical sweep. The city, the body of this room, is all friction, all heat transfer. People talk, objects are handled. The drug conducts through shared flesh, but the screen, the lag creates a buffer, an insulation. Each statement lands alone, without the immediate gravity of a reaction. You get to edit, not just your appearance, but your effect. You speak into the ether. It is the purest form of speech, unburdened by the gravity of an audience's gaze in real time. It is a message in a bottle sent to a hall of mirrors. Miguel, always want to connect the esoteric to the infrastructural, leans forward. He brings up the Zoom interface on his phone, thumb swiping through contacts. You're all describing the phenomenology. I'm talking about the traffic. This, he taps the screen, is just a protocol writing the same pipes our online banking uses. It's anonymized data for a corporation, so we've taken the most intimate act of collective self-destruction and handed the logs to Cisco. You talk about privacy, about creating spaces away from the cop's flashlight. But every login, every meeting ID is a router log entry. You think the state doesn't have an open source intelligence analyst now whose entire job is mapping the subculture of encrypted Zoom party IDs cross-referenced with, say, a temporary spike in too far requests on Grindr? You created a new, more convenient wiretap. You polished the mirrors on your panopticon yourself. His statement lands with the specific, cold dread of a dropped ice cube. But Miguel isn't done. And then there's the strangest variable of all, the one noble I talked about. He says, and now he has everyone's undivided attention. The room, your room. You turn your camera on, your bed behind you, your bookshelf, the little Japanese print you got at the flea market. You perform your apartment, but your camera, even when you're muted, it's still listening to the acoustics of your space. The app, the client on your laptop, is constantly running a noise cancellation algorithm to isolate your voice. And the best way to do that, to figure out what isn't why. Our speech, the program learns the acoustic signature of your room, the reverb of the walls, the specific hum of your ancient fridge. It builds a 3D model of the empty space you live in so it can carve your voice out from the background. And selling you better audio. It's selling a perfect architectural map of your most vulnerable space. The silent echoes become intelligible metadata. A new, almost sacred silence falls over the room. It's heavier than the others. This isn't poetry or engineering or philosophy. It's cryptography of the mundane. Their homes are being fingerprinted not by the lock on their door, but by the empty air between the words they speak into a screen. There are accounts on the dark web, a new, quiet voice offers. It's Eliza. She has a preternatural instinct for the great economies that support and prey on their lives. Her phone is discreetly held in her lap. They're called acoustic brokers, not for drug deals, but for black ops, government, corporate espionage. You don't need a bug in an embassy anymore if you can just buy the digital model of a room's echo profile from a failed military contractor who scraped it from a cloud computing mistake. She scrolls slowly, and sometimes the data is for sale for much less sinister purposes. There's a niche kink market for blueprints of apartments belonging to known porn performers and guys like you. So some lonely creep in Slovenia can feel like he's standing in the same empty room where one of your parties is being held. The topic of the fuckery is brought up, and there is much anecdote to be had. The phrase lands in the room, a half-spoken, half-grown incantation. The fuckery. Eliza said it so quietly it could have been lost. Maybe it was meant only for her and her phone, but the room has been attuned to tremor, to vibrations beneath the floor, and that was a 7 to an emotional Richter scale. Leo visibly brightens, the tension in his jaw releasing as if a knot has been deliberately untied. Oh, honey, the fuckery, he exclaims, a gasp of delighted recognition. You can build a church to the fuckery. We need stained glass windows depicting its most glorious moments. He leans back, arms outstretched on the couch, invoking the role of the storyteller at court. Okay, fresh off the presses, a week ago, Brooklyn, Crown Heights. The invite looked like a software development conference call. Topic, phase to UI/expect and sync. The password? Always lick the spoon. I thought I was clever getting in until 10 minutes, and I realized there was a room full of video game producers from Sweden. Sweet. Fumbling English as a second language, Swedish muscle gaze, trying to learn our customs. The fuckery. They thought chemsex was a new category of tactical RPG. They kept asking about skill tree unlocks and trying to optimize party member synergy. With spreadsheets, actual color-coded Google Sheets projected onto the living room wall. We were trying to have a transcendent experience, and they were worried about DPS. Damien's laugh is a dry rustle of leaves. The fuckery I'm into has no spreadsheets, only ghosts. He gazes into the middle distance, not seeing the penthouse, but some older, grimier version of it. East Village, mid-90s. Above a Punjabi deli on Avenue, the host, Rafael, a beautiful, flame-haired queen from Puerto Rico, double. How had survived the brunt of it? The apartment was a memory palace, every wall covered in photos of men who were no longer there. But that wasn't the fuckery. The fuckery was the silence whenever the door opened. Everyone would tense, because the person coming in might be fresh meat, or he might be the ghost. We had a guest one night, a twink, so beautiful, so young, and he wanted to hear stories. And Raphael, God bless him, started telling one about a man he loved. And as the story was flowing, the twink, starts touching Raphael's arm. And this other queen across the room, covered in fading tattoos, just stares. The fuckery wasn't even the twink's ignorance. It was the thick, palpable terror in the room that the act of remembering a dead friend could instantly be interpreted as a betrayal of the grief still vibrating in the air like a piano string held down forever. That's the fuckery. That the space of our gathering is also the mausoleum. Sage lets the silence settle for a beat. Then, with a detached precision, she contributes her shard. The fuckery is an IKEA nightmare. This elicits scattered, knowing groans from the group. Hell's Kitchen, a micro studio no bigger than a large walk-in closet. The host, Chad, a sweet but deeply misguided soul from Ohio, and just built a new media console using the instructions app. He was so proud, and the party is deep. The bass is humming. He's making out with some Wall Street bro against the wall, and the whole system. The wall-mounted TV, the sound bar, the little glass shelves with his artisanal bitters, sub made disengage from its cheap fiberboard anchors in slow motion. It didn't just fall. It sheared sideways, a beige and black monolith crashing down. Incredibly, it missed the two of them by inches, but it arced. After the fire sprinkler pipe in the wall, the smell of wet particle board, the shriek of a Wall Street banker in $400 briefs covered in fiberglass insulation and codependent funk, and the fuckery, the violent, absurd intrusion of cheap, mass-produced capitalism into an act of radical subjectivity. Eliza puts her phone down, screen down, on the marble tabletop. My fuckery has a victim's fee. The mood in the room instantly cools. I had a client, a guy with, I kid you not, a political science degree from Georgetown. He'd learned a list of buzzwords about systemic oppression from podcasts. Thought it made him a good guy. Over the course of a 5-hour date in a hotel in Lexington, where you can hear the L train rumbling underneath the floorboards, he managed to call my friend a sister of travesty in his trade, a biosavvy resource aggregator, twice. He spoke about my disembodied labor value, as if it were an item he could put on a resume to show he wasn't just another chaser. The high just stopped for me in that instant. I was clean, raw, and present. The fuckery is watching a snake devour itself to be able to justify how it wants to co-opt your body. It's the progressive version of the same old transaction. When the quiet that follows threatens to solidify, Miel finally speaks. His narrative isn't a single, clean-cut anecdote, but a web. He's in front of the window again, a vast, paneled expanse of indifferent star glitter over the concrete park. He maps the city onto the glass, pointing. When a city outlaws nightlife because it worries too much about asterisk, quality of life noise complaints for luxury residents, asterisk, the public party loses its footing. So everyone retreats further behind walls or up into the clouds. It changes the calculus, not just of sex, but of community, what we used to do on a weekly basis. Communion, grief sharing. You now have to reserve online a 2-week space for. He gestures towards the penthouse you occupy for this moment now. A dealer's apartment I know of, is a 5th floor walk-up in Queens. One night, a guest, the friend I was telling you about the day we tested your method after a burnout. We tested using her own little contraptions. Well, I took them to that apartment. Over their run at night, and sighs a world's history hidden in that one breath as the lights flickers across that mirror glass of Manhattan outside. When she got too high for a run of long, quiet, dark thoughts, her real ghost rose up inside the room's shape. The room, our gathering point, started to feel toxic, not the good kind. She got anxious because the vibe of the apartment itself was a ruin whose architect died. So many of those in our tribe-made homes without having any asterisk land. I got in trouble there. Someone got out. That's when I found the place where we do some of our training, teaching people that are, for a lot of us who only have these limited spaces, domestic spaces. The host JV watches you from another chair now. We need your eye, the host says to you, to see how your small murmurs to our expert host M, of a well-known high-level harm reduction advocacy consultant, become a new weapon used to fight inside of this room. And the only place where we really talk about the fuckery openly, the room you wrote, M says, nodding slowly at me, knowing full well my real occupation, to sit inside these precarious homes like mine and make maps no one but the state wants. A vulture's job with good branding. My presence here at all marks the tension between the value of community memory and the risk of making it intelligible. What if the asterisk fuckery isn't an anecdote? He posed the question to you directly. I see an ecosystem the city is using against us when it tries to define deviant behavior. It is then a subtle change flows through the group. An hour before I came, we had a guest have a paranoid psychosis break up through the walls with the neighbor opposite us over a leak they found. He got kicked out, the host, a top-level real estate lawyer, of course, explained. Now imagine that same argument transmitted through the data lens. We are all complicit in allowing our community devices to give an argument, a mental crisis. Suddenly there are flagged keywords. Like the building is on fire is a thing I said in a group chat as a joke, and the host Smart Buildings Home Monitoring Central Commands received the ticket. He waves a fresh hand, and up on a newly projected smart TV is a list of building tickets for smell of smoke, no visitor violation, etc. Because our chemical ghosts, our chempatter, are now visible to this building lobby systems. Because every unit's new nanny cam offered by the property management for free, a convenience to protect their home, to allow a fast 24/7 response, could also be set in developer mode to isolate unusual speech patterns of guests. But don't worry, he assures the people in the lobby. The encryption standards for Astor's domestic use remain safe from corporate or government mining. We would never sell that. That's the fuckery. Not as anecdote, but the architecture. not just the asterisk clause, asterisk power, but the now interior of lease agreements. Not anymore the fear of a uniformed cop with too much pragmatic enforcement and nothing but a flimsy baddie to worry about, but a building concierge in a uniform with a slightly thicker, better fabric quality clipboard reviewing a digital spreadsheet with suspicious consumer behaviors generated by AI for a building management company 1,000 miles away in Omaha. That's the new armament. The rest, we create ourselves from this pressure cooker, the good with the harm. Your story about the Swedes trying to hack our experience with spreadsheets wasn't some quirky anecdote. That was the feedback loop. People from our community who went straight but still remember, who taught others that we aren't just hedonists. And now the system that made our world private behind doors have now studied us and learned to manipulate our communal desires. The Swedes with their spreadsheets, not some random quirk. They were from a consulting firm hired by the same owners as your high-value client, Javier says to Miguel, nodding slow. We now exist inside their system. He insists. Not quite at Miguel yet. My guest's breakdown was recorded, the data showing a psychotic episodic outburst. Suspected substance inside it will be sent to that corporation's algorithms and feed directly in a different stream that then calibrates rent and lease value risk avoidance down the road. When someone sues building MGMT, they aren't being pushed from back rooms into hidden apartments. You see, we are actively being lured inside to rooms carefully designed to look like liberation, but which are in fact data dredging sites. A long lensing effect turning the user not by force, but by convenience and privacy into human-shaped data packets. You realize that Javier, who purchased a hidden room and uses the drug himself at these parties, doesn't think he's better than anyone from this. This makes what he's doing worse. He's a collaborator, but of course, they also need an interpreter like me. He looks from Javier, this complex figure, to you, the analyst. Your thesis is correct, but the map you're making of all this is wrong. The ghost you said is here is much more complicated. My friend told you about a specific memory. The effective harbored memory of this new kind of space he felt the day, and we argued if we had our little vibration, then others must do. The cohort kick around the term counter-public. The phrase finds its footing on the designer-finished coffee table, laid there with tentative reverence, as if it might be too fragile to hold up to the room's scrutiny. Counter-public. The word is a clinical, academic sterility that feels alien in this space saturated with sweat, base, and truth. Leo is the first to poke it. A counter-public, he says, testing the syllables, letting them roll around his tongue. Honey, the word sounds like we all collectively decided to start drinking Coke Zero in protest of New Coke. It sounds so polite, so up to Nazareth. We're not a counter-public, we're a counter-aid. He takes a sharp hit off the freshly prepared pipe, the taste clean, the vapor a ghost in the air. A counter-public gets a newspaper, a zine. We get parlor accounts that get nuked after 2 weeks. We get snap maps that expire. We exist in flashes, in stories deleted before sunrise. We're not a culture, we're a flicker. Damien, however, gives the word a grudging, slow nod. He leans back, the one letter of the armchair creaking beneath him. Public implies a space to speak, to perform identity, to be seen. What we do here, he gestures around the room, indicating the shared secrets, the fluid identities, the ghost-laden history. This is not a performance. This is the antechamber, the prep room, the public face, the face we used on March banners and at ACT UP protests. That was the counter-public. We shouted in the streets. But this, after we finish the party, he looks at Sage and then to Miguel, making sure his point lands on the people he trusts with its vulnerability. But this is a space that lets us breathe in a world with very little clean air left after so many have died in it. Maybe there's not a better word. This finally draws out Miguel. He's been watching the debate with an unnerving stillness. The term counter-public assumes there is still a unified public to counter. He sets his empty glass down with a definitive click. There isn't. The drug war dismantled that. Splintered the gay public into the marketable log cabin Republican and the bathhouse Briar. And now, he waves a hand at the high-end, surveillance vulnerable apartment. Now you're not even a counterculture, you're a niche market algorithm. I work at a firm that uses the same data clusters used to target Kim6 network nodes to optimize cat food ads for specific zip codes. The public is just a spreadsheet we're a blip on. Counter-public is the false comfort the elite give to those they've already successfully corralled. It says, you have your space, we have ours. He leans forward. Is energy now fully engaged? Predatory? No, we're not a public or counter-public. We are an infra-territorial community, a sovereign state with no recognized land. Infra-territorial. He just coins a term here that seems to ring true. This rings true for some, for others it's a challenge. This rings a little bitter. And infra-territory doesn't fight for territory it can recognize. That is what public culture does. A group that demands flags, parades. He points a finger, slicing the air now with scalpel-like precision as he moves this group, this home, at will. For an infra-territory, all we got are effect zones. We are communities based on vibe, not zip code. These rooms are our country for 12 or 15 hours each day. We exist temporarily in the temporary houses of those who were lucky enough to have a home we got invited to when we are between rent, between jobs. He stops on the lawyer of the house he's been in for so long now, with the ones who know how to find a charge of power from old phone batteries to get back onto the web when your phone's been stolen. We live in between lines. Because the official policy and the big-time pushers at these tech companies created it themselves by creating platforms that let you easily organize to a host, and more importantly, securely pay for. The space you need to feel temporarily free from the war you are always in. And even I feel, looking at my hidden notepad screen at the far end, my tablet with unblinking eye above this entire high-stage drama. My feelings about this conversation suddenly sour. I feel this group being managed, not truly interrogated. Why do you speak for us with your terms? Eliza asks with quiet steel. She knows he cannot hide with his lawyer host. Suddenly their whole encounter with me looks different from everyone in here. Like seeing a building is made of glass after being inside it your entire life. I am a host, Miguel responds, a trace of regret or melancholy, to see that we require a place just to hold space for us to remember who we want to be, who we are when no systems are in place to force certain behaviors. This to realize this drug doesn't make it easier to get high, it makes it easier to exist inside the unnatural way modern power structure forces everyone. Sage interrupts, who gets to set the terms for describing even that. How can you, our hosts, talk in these language when so many can't? They aren't invited to some rent-stabilized piece of Manhattan that you keep just as a makeshift field headquarters while you work from at a firm that profits from these things we discuss. Her head gestures to the large smart TV over the wet bar. Its standby light blinking, a pulse. Because all your frameworks, she says, finger quotes floating in the stale smoke and perfume of the room, are maps for a different city. Not New York. Not our New York. Mia has an answer, preformed. He looks directly at Sage. These frameworks also apply to places you've tried to find with my friends, our host's contact info, but couldn't, and so you defaulted your friends. I only visited places listed on those shared Google Doc that passed around our circle on Signal in a compressed PDF. So what then? Damien pushes, arms crossed, suspicious now. He wants a confession. What does being a host even mean here, Miel? It means those of us with any modicum of structural power must repurpose the spaces they make available to us to serve others in our community as vessels, as temporary outposts. A way to escape to something like what he gestured towards, those pre-theoretical worlds from before the war. So we use the language our oppressors constructed as a method to speak about us, while constructing our own worlds within the network spaces on platforms owned by our literal targets. This conversation cannot be contained now. The counterpublic has its limitations. The drug war created a situation where you either lived in some ratty sorrow, your only way a place like this. Sage gestures impatiently. You'll still get one. With some luck, maybe. So we created a shadow system. The ghost scheme to create and pay with crypto to guarantee payments for secure, privacy-insured spaces. And that was only necessary once we realized the old meetups at places like the St. Mark's spots that were firebombed. The new spaces, the private apartments, are now being logged. The infra-territory is not a label of pride, it is a diagnosis. And just like that meal slips it in, letting that lie like a shard. We built a house out of whatever we could find, out of glass pipes and metro cards and stolen Wi-Fi. A house whose foundation is abandonment is a kind of sovereign right. There was a freedom. This new country is the absence of their laws, of their maps, on which we appear only as a blank spot. Javier leans back, but even they can adapt. The problem is, I begin. Miguel anticipates. The problem, Miguel continues smoothly, as if finishing asterisk, my half-formed thought asterisk, is that the people from the old networks didn't all die in previous epidemics. The cohort is invited to forge the language of themselves, about themselves, by themselves, and amongst themselves. Let's burn the words, down to the white. Consecrated slang for the aqueous self. The proposal hangs in the air, not a thought, but a command uttered from a deeper, more resonant chamber of the collective nerve endings. Let's build from the dust, not their theories, not their clinical pathologies, not our own tired nostalgias. We need a new operational grammar, an epistemology woven from the specific quality of the light after the 12-hour run, from the way silence sounds different, from the phantom itch of skin that isn't there. A language built inside our specific, chemically electrified present. Adlin forms in Sage's eye. She is the high priestess of this new religion, tasked with giving form to the formless. If we are an infra-territory, she begins, her voice slow and deliberate, as if tracing a symbol in dust. What are we then? Not citizens, not soldiers. We are what floats in the amniotic of it. We are risen, she pronounces. The word a crisp, surprising filament that cuts through the smoky haze. Because you have risen, the body sheds the weight of the world, the expected gravitational pull of sorrow, of bureaucracy. We enter this state as one thing and exit, however many hours later, as something reconfigured, not transcended in some spiritual, wash-clean way, but risen in the way bread proof risen, unpacked, fermented, bloated with potential, yes, with toxicity too, but undeniably risen. Risen, it felt right. It didn't imply a heroism like survivor or a defeat like user. It described a state of being, a transitional physics. Leo snaps his fingers, a spark of inspiration. Okay, so the risen. We need a word for where we are when we're risen. Not a party, not a scene. That sounds so on TV too. I'm scrolling through an imaginary phone. And definitely not a space. That's what they call yoga studios. When you're spun for a day, you're living, a chorus. The room tilts. Chorus. Leo asserts. Think about it. You add a body and a substance, just one new person, and the entire harmony and melody of the 12-16 hours changes its key. But there's a song. We're vibing on the main. It's got its resonances. Your crush walks in, and the tenor part suddenly swells. Someone brings that shardy, uncut stuff, and it goes sour, flat as sharp. A fight happens. A note of dissonance that we have to all work through, resolve, or fade out over. It wasn't an event. It was an ecosystem. humming at a new frequency, a living, breathing chord progression composed of chemical affected consciousnesses. We'll need the vocabulary of the mechanics. Damien adds, always searching for the underlying form. The mechanics that turn the stone to a chorus. His gaze is not on the people, but on the glass, the tools, the processes of transformation. When a guest enters the chorus, they make an initial arrival. That's simple. But if they get to that spun state, their body is attuned. He chooses the word carefully, attuned. You are no longer just consuming a substance, you are moving into aspirous attunement. Aspirous, the first pulse of it. When your shoulders are not from a week of carrying the weight of other people's expectations, that's a break. He touches two fingertips to his thumb. Break, like the surf breaking, the initial jolt. After that, your day of it is just negotiating a long, fading echo along the shoreline of the high. Eliza scoffs slightly, pulling a thing off her dress. Her need has always been for language sharp as broken mirror, reflecting a reality the aestheticism of her friend sounded too smooth. These fine metaphors glided over grit and scat. After all her work, chorus and shoreline sound beautiful. But tell me, she asks, her gaze fixed and sharp on nothing in particular, staring through them all into the unwritten part of their narrative. What do you call what comes next for her? The person for whom this chorus, her attunement, wasn't an optional beautiful song, but a necessary backdraft against freezing to death. She came looking for shelter in the glow, and the only chorus willing to accept her passport. What is your delicate language for her, Madame? Or the landing, as M called the earlier entry. Some words you hear still use other ways that others outside the network call the hangover. But those words assume a day of revelry whose cost is simply discomfort. When your very existence has been transactional in ways no one in this room understands, Herkomedon after the landing should be called costing. This is the bill arriving after services, after a shift of letting someone's hands on your body parts. Her gaze turns from theoretical and personal at once into weapon. For it, then its other shape. The cost, she breathed out. It isn't when you eat and try to go get you more, it's before. Or maybe it's when the glow finally drains and your body suddenly becomes just flesh and blood again on the mattress. All that heavy noise of the outside rushes back into the silence. You're high created, but for some folks it rushes back for a new need. So risen may not be enough. Some ghosts are never willing to relinquish what they hold in their blood. She had never once explained its origins of the word that only trans women deep in these chemsex world use. For some of them, the drug gave them not just a reprieve, but a transfiguration, a fluidity unavailable outside that orbit. Then it becomes the unriding. Miel answered, meeting her now. The term dropped like a flat stone into a dark pool, sending ripples into all their worlds. After a day in a chorus, when the tide goes out, you are faced not only with the wreckage of the last run, but now a brand new, clean, but still disenwide. After all the language, you know, has no grammar for it. The sheer quiet in this expensive living room made even the refrigerator hum now had distinct layers and shadow. Viewing the risen, the true cost. So here you are now, Miel explains in a quiet way of taking in the larger vista through floor-to-ceiling windows, a perspective that let him see the infrastructure that kept our networks alive and yet held a cold sword of terror. You called yourself an observer, not a participant. This entire penthouse full of carefully curated domestic artifacts can only serve its function if a certain set of people don't know it is truly under observation. His focus turns fully on me. I see he is speaking not just to the group in the room, not just for a shared narrative, but for you. In the specific meta layer, you as the one who shapes these stories. We told you stories. They thought they were being interviewed for your blog. Your asterisk, book asterisk. He nearly spat that word out, but regained his practiced neutrality like he was used to holding both sides of negotiation in a sterile boardroom. He's no longer just an affable, high-functioning friend. He's the general contractor building and assessing the flood defenses. And he now sees them being threatened from within. I am not surprised you didn't challenge when my friend made their quiet exit the other day, nor did you blink when Brennan stopped showing up on the meetups a few months ago after he left for a contract out west. Because you assumed him being risen or having their little tragedies not the outcome for a new state of emergency. But you have access to us, it matters. Because this entire infra-territory is not insulated, but has points of leaks. People with S in urban sociology, as this host describes me, come in and talk with them about the chorus and think that it's this neat self-contained. He reaches into a smooth, hidden compartment in the bookshelf that slides open. Inside isn't crystal, but a thin black drive, lying on a velvet pad with a soft, red digital readout counting downward, a USB key sitting flush. He picks it up, the drive weighing almost nothing. The room falls silent. The energy of the chorus is immediately repurposed. It is surveillance data. This observation of a counter-public, but also turning us into a product that makes a real profit in the world's existing power structures. Our infra-territory's existence is dependent upon anonymity. His gaze is now utterly, preternaturally serious as he locks eyes with me. And for someone whose method is rigorous analysis, who says they are not a cop, not big government, that doesn't understand what you've become an involuntary agent of, turn in a secret state. But what does Arisen have but only its own shorelines? I think to myself, listening carefully. After the cost comes the unwriting, because after all, the story has to be made visible. The unmaking, and this room's perfect order is now slowly unwritten. Miel held up the drive between two elegant manicured fingers like a surgeon holding. Our little corner of the world needed observers, and for the good work perhaps a new term can be carved by us for you, cartographers, and offers a new slang. This changes your lens, cartographer, no longer observant outsider, which gives you. Cartography was used for war, Sage says, her body vibrating intensely now for an unseen predator, her eyes focused somewhere else. Redraw maps, define assets, abilities. Anonymity disappears into the neat grid lines. She crosses her arms, and it begins in the map's language. The room freezes. They understand he has turned all against him. Every piece of paper you have with a code name on it isn't code to them. It becomes a node in a model. Even I saw the little white Vespa car in the kitchen, and how Leo mentioned that I was thinking of that not as a scooter, but as data points. Spirited, likely low income. As Italian connections. Inference becomes tool of categorization, control. A map of the dead, Damien said. Now there is a different type of anonymity in its purest form is a ghost in it. So, cartographers of type, ethical code, constraint. 1. Never map location specifics of the shoreline. Here, the central tension of the past evening unspools so quickly it seems to tear as the language building game collapses. An uneasy laughter cracks out, but it is brittle as frosting. Miel's chorus is ruined from being so deeply mapped out like this by an academic. But this is it, isn't it? Turn the lens away from the lens. You shift the journalist, the observer. In front of them is a different reality. This talk was not to create a new inclusive language. It was, you shift away from me. I become a placeholder, so your actual thesis emerges. This little micro-community, their precious chorus, these rights, my job. They will become the cartographers. I hold the device that tells you. The drive Miel pulled from the secret copy, it's not data on the community, not profiles of guests. It's every 5 minutes for the last 6 months, this thing has been recording. The cohort on just how much this future is actual Philip K. Dixon, we just live in it. This, for the second it changes the emotional field. Your brain flickers like a dying light. That feeling, the micro deja vu, the shock and all the precognition so common in our modern digital existence now. Miel is the one to say it, the name that hangs in the air, unspoken but always present among those steeped in the wrong kind of futurology. He lets out a short, hollow laugh, a sound devoid of humor. We're not living in Philip K. Dick's future, are we? The question isn't rhetorical. We're the deleted scenes from the cutting room floor. The shit that was too depressing to us was unresolvable as to even make the final draft. Dick saw the paranoia of the institution, the scramble to know what was real. But at least in his stories, you still had something resembling a self to lose, a Deckard. He gestures toward the hidden compartment, which lies ajar now, a dark gash in the wall of curated domesticity. This isn't about the individual wrestling with a blurring of reality. This is a post-individual paradigm. We're just nodes on the corporate rendering farm, generating a fever dream they market back to us as a subscription service for self-liberation, which the smart buildings AI then uses to create a mega-device type premium for your eventual corporate mandated relocation back to Kansas. You're not just searching for the real electric sheep. The electric sheep is the one rating your 5-star experience of being a sheep for a future quarterly shareholder report. Leo, the artist, slumps back onto the couch, the manic performance temporarily short-circuited by the raw nerve that's been exposed. Oh, it's Astroth the scanner, darkly. Astroth kills you so slowly that by the time you arrive at your new force commune in Ohio, you are perfectly programmed and rebranded, and you accept it. This is closer to the 3 stigmata of Palmer Eldritch Asterisk, but without the drugs actually giving you cool psychedelic god powers. Sage notes, normally calm, verve strained to a thread than tension. She stands up, walking to the large kitchen island where the remnants of the risen still sit scattered like offerings to some forgotten deity. Palmer Eldritch was this godlike alien entrepreneur who offered a product, Shoe Z, that let you experience an entire alternative timeline in what felt like years of your life, while only minutes passed in reality. She runs her finger along the marble, gathering and dusting the fine lavender powder. A relic, an archaeological sample of the last chorus. The ultimate escape, but the catch was Eldritch. He was there too. Interfacing your subconscious dreams, shaping them, colonizing the inside of your mind. You couldn't escape a corporation. The corporation was living in your head. She looks directly at me. This isn't about driving Miel's hand. You, the observer, the cartographer, the one who always holds the final analysis on what defines our community. And when you, journalists, come into these shoreline sessions, if it's about us to say we just create a self-destructive system, we built ourselves to survive. Actually, we can't die just once. Our every moment of peace is stolen from outside but resold back to us from a cheap plastic bottle under the guise of personal liberation. There's no salvation as what makes them be real that the original alien turned into a business. You're the marketing arm, making sure the fiction looks credible. You hold that. This is our now. No longer just... Javier nods and holds the key in it. It looks. It copies the chorus, but not the action. Just the potentialities. Harmonic. Now she can hold onto my shoulders, her touch grounding. I needed anchor as we all...
No. Let's get back to... Let's do that. We do not remember that
The
tale.
building itself is the pre-call, Damien says, finishing a thought that was half formed minutes ago. He's not looking at anyone. but at the sheer, transparent surface of the living room window that reveals a million other similar expensive glass encased lives, all glowing in the dark like so many fireflies in a jar. He points. That smart home system. The building and GMT program analyzing emotional states from audio signatures. It's not just logging a psychotic episodic outburst. It is arresting us for a thought crime before a crime occurs. And we, with our carefully protected private chorus, gave it the acoustic models of our pre-criminal state. Minority Report was about the state trying to stop murders. Here, it's about real estate capital trying to preemptively devalue their own assets based on algorithmic predictions of non-optimal human effect. The system doesn't police crime. It polices provides assets. So bad vibe reduces the building's value. This is the most true, most damning thing I have heard all night. It's not the fear of a uniformed cop breaking down the door with an illegal warrant. Damien continues, a profound sadness heavy in his voice like the dust from an erased chalkboard. It is the slow, bureaucratic death by 1,000 service fee notifications on your building app. Your smart thermostat logs how many times you left your apartment at 3 a.m. for a walk, cross-reference with a chorus attunement, and suddenly your lease renewal option has quietly disappeared. This is not about big guns, it's about the smaller, invisible weapons. Miel picks up the thread seamlessly. The data collector from the Cabello hasn't vanished, nor has the anger. They've fused, become a new element in the periodic table of the infraterritorial. And the chorus itself is a feedback loop, Miel notes, sounding like a systems analyst presenting a breakdown report to board members, terrifying in its emotional detachment. Our private harm reduction efforts are now actively being data mined. Google's AI models are being trained on the most intimate, hyper-detailed, anonymized logs from private health forums where we discuss mixing low doses with ACE risk or the best way to recover a crashed liver with supplements. All scraped. Harm reduction has become a user experience beta test for the pharmatech industry's next generation of microdose neuroenhancers to be sold to anxious college kids. We are unwittingly writing our own clinical trial data. We think we are rebels fighting a drug war, but we're just the R&D division for a newer, more insidious form of corporate chemical control. It's Sage who gives it the final, damning definition, pushing herself up from the kitchen island, a body a coiled wire of righteous exhaustion. This is not Asterisk Cascan or Darkly Asterisk. They couldn't have imagined the passivity. At least Bob Barker was an undercover agent observing something. We are the active, willing participants who built the panopticon ourselves because the rent was cheaper and the lighting was better. We're inside the scramble suit, but we paid a subscription for it. Our identity isn't just scrambled, it's been licensed. We are being paid, barely and only in the psychic currency of temporary community to perform our own surveillance. She gestures to the clean, sleek pipe Miel just filled and hit. This very pipe might have sensors embedded, its own Wi-Fi-enabled heartbeat being analyzed by some developer friend of Javier's. We are not hiding from the state. We are beta testing the state's next generation methods of population control. The war is not outside the walls anymore. We are its most willing, most innovative, and most unaware soldiers. She looks at me, a stare direct burning, and for the first time I feel not like an interloper but an artifact myself. A tool, a lens, a witness complicit in the very mechanisms I'm supposed to merely analyze. The academic decides to take up the pipe, putting the participant in participant observer. An offer, Miel says, and the words hang in the deadened air, not a question but a statement of transactional fact. He holds the pipe out to me, the coiled glass cool and inert but heavy with the gravity of what it represents. That is an invitation not to a high, but to a crossroads. He is not offering me a dose, he is offering me my own final definition in their argument. I am no longer the cartographer, the observer with the God's eye view. The only choice left is whether I will be a ghost in their chorus or a body in it. participant observer. The academic term is a flimsy shield against the raw material fact of it. To participate is to be altered. To observe from the inside is to become part of the observed system. I take the pipe. The glass is slit, cool, strangely impersonal in my hands, yet I feel the latent heat of the last hit vibrating within its microstructure. The room's 5 pairs of eyes are not judgmental, they are clinical, analytical. They are already observing my observation. The power dynamic hasn't shifted, it has only been redrawn. I am now the data point, my physiology the new text to be read. My nervous system, a nervous system calibrated to interpret reality through theory, is about to be handed a new operating manual. I place the stem to my lips. The glass is smooth and almost pressureless seal. It feels like the cold mouth of a flute before the first note. I watch Miguel's hand, a surgeon's grace, as he wields the torch. He does not offer a lesson in how not to burn your shit. There is no need. The offer itself is the lesson. He moves the flame not towards the bowl, but just beside it, the way Sage described. A flirtation. He is not heating a substance, he is charging an atmosphere. For a split second, the blue flame kisses the glass, and the crystals inside shift, a microscopic avalanche. I inhale. The initial taste is alike, a medicinal, chemical faintness, like the scent of a freshly cleaned hospital corridor. Then the heat arrives. It is not a burning, but a deep, resonant pressure at the back of my throat, the expansion of a universe inside my own lungs. I pull the vapor in, a slow, steady intake as if I'm breathing pure, liquid energy. I hold it. The world doesn't shift yet. It goes silent. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a city siren, the faint blood draw in my own ears, it all flatlines into a profound, weightless numb. In this void, I am pure potential, an unformatted hard drive. Then I exhale. The world rushes back in, but it is not the same world. The quality of light from the panoramic window has changed. It is no longer just light, it is a medium, thick with information, streaming through the room in visible waves. The deep blue-black of the night sky is now a canvas, and the sodium lamps of the street below are not just points of illumination, but brushstrokes of raw, unfiltered energy. I can feel the vibrations of the city, the subway groaning a block underground, a frequency thrumming up through the soles of my shoes and into my teeth. The room is no longer a collection of objects. It is an assemblage of relationships, each one humming with a specific tone. And I see them. I don't just see them as characters in my narrative, my case studies. I see the effect field they generate, a shimmering, coruscating energy that connects them all. I see the deep, weary current of loss flowing from Damien, a river that has carved canyons into his soul. I see the frantic, glittering sparks of anxious joy that pop around me like microscopic fireworks, a desperate defense against the void. I see Sage, humming, coiled wire of control, a body of finely tuned instrument trying to conduct the chaotic symphony. And I see Eliza, a steady, focused beam of pure survival, her presence a hard white point of defiance in the overwhelming static of the room. And Miel, I see him as a nexus point, a relay station where data and effect are received, transformed, and rebroadcast with chilling precision. My theoretical frameworks dissolve like salt in water. Effect theory was a map, and this is the territory. The feeling is a terrifying clarity. The academic partitions in my mind, the neat little boxes for kinship, trauma, ritual, resistance. They shatter and fall away, replaced by a raw, streaming consciousness. The separation between observer and observed evaporates. I am no longer writing about the shoreline of a chorus. I am treading water in its undertow. My heart hammers a frantic, syncopated rhythm against my ribs, and I understand, not intellectually but corporeally, the impulse toward organization. The scattered debris on the coffee table, a bottle cap, a stray lighter, a crumpled receipt. suddenly presents itself as an offense to the universe, a collection of unresolved data points crying out for a system. The chorus begins its work on me. My observations are no longer external. I hear my own voice say it. It sounds alien to me. A disembodied transmission from a newly occupied cockpit. The analysis is internalized. The interface is the bloodstream. Leo grins, a flash of teeth and a gloom. Welcome to the shore, he says, a proprietary pride in his tone. First taste of the surf. Get ready for the tide. And the tide does come. It is a cognitive cascade. The connections between ideas fire not in logical sequence, but in explosive, branching fractals. The drive me yell-held, the cartographer's map, the smart building's acoustic surveillance, my own note-taking. They are not separate points. They are a single, continuous loop, a snake eating its own tail. We are the research. The room is the lab. My analysis, written as an external critique, is a vital component of the very system I thought I was dissecting. The cartographer was a misnomer. I am the ink. The paranoia is not a fear of being watched. It is the absolute, unshakable certainty of it. The smart TV's blinking standby light is no longer an inert lead. It is a beacon, accentile. The pulse of light modulates, and in my heightened state, I can almost decipher its pattern, a binary whisper of our conversation streaming to a server farm in a climate-controlled desert. Every laugh, every cough, every subtle shift in effect quantified. Subject exhibits elevated levels of euphoric engagement upon mention of chorus, cross-referenced with Spotify listening history, high peak correlation coefficient. 0, 78. This is the core of it, the Philip K. Dick-made flesh, the erosion of the distinction between the authentic self and the data profile. The drug doesn't just make you paranoid, it gives you the keys to the very system that is built on your paranoia and lets you watch it work in real time. The horror is not the surveillance, but the elegance of its design. We have a problem, I say, the words tumbling out, stripped of academic padding, a logic loop. We can't build a language to describe the cage if the cage is learning the language as we build it. Miguel nods slowly, an expression of grim vindication on his face. He's not surprised. He was waiting for me to catch up. The cage is not static, he says, his voice a calm counterpoint to the frantic buzzing in my skull. It's an adaptive ecosystem. We are its microbiome. This makes my skin crawl. The chorus, our secret country, is not a sovereign state at all. It is a living lab, its inhabitants a petri dish of stress reactions, behavioral triggers, and emotional responses, all meticulously fed into a learning algorithm designed to maximize engagement, optimize real estate value, or something more banal and terrifying. To make the cage so comfortable, so perfectly tailored to the desires of its inhabitants that they will willingly pay for their own containment. Sage rises, moving with a liquid grace that seems to defy the frantic energy saturating the room. She goes to the window, pressing a palm flat against the cool glass. She doesn't look out at the city. She looks at the reflection of our room, our faces distorted and fragmented by the night beyond. We are building ghosts. She murmurs, her voice barely audible, yet it cuts through the hum. Our desire for escape is being rendered back to us as a simulacrum of escape, a ghost of freedom. We chase the ghost, and it runs ahead of us, always slightly out of reach, leading us deeper into the maze. This is the ultimate hustle, the most profound fuckery of all. The drug war didn't just fail to eradicate drug use, it evolved. It learned that prohibition was a crude, inefficient tool. The new methodology is not to ban the desire, but to monetize it, to securitize it, to turn the entire infra territory into a profitable, self-governing data farm. We are our own jailers, but we think we're the party planners. We should unplug it, I hear myself say. My thoughts, stripped of their academic armor, are now direct, terrifyingly simple. The TV, the building system, all of it. Leo lets out a short, sharp laugh. And how dark. You think the Wi-Fi isn't coming through the walls from the next apartment. You think there aren't listening posts in the streetlight cameras that are triangulating our heartbeats through the glass. There is no off switch. We're in the stream now. Miguel looks from me to the drive in his hand, then back to me. He holds it out again, not as an offer this time, but as a shared burden, a piece of toxic evidence. This drive isn't what you think it is, he says, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. It's not a log of our activities. It's a key. It's the master key for the entire building's mesh network. The heating, the elevators, the fire suppression, and yes, the surveillance ray. It's a skeleton key for Arcadia. The room goes utterly still. The drug-induced frenzy of thought coalesces around the single artifact. The silence is so profound I can hear the faint hum of the city's electrical grid, a vibration I now understand is the nervous system of the system itself. Where did you get that? Damien asked, his voice a low growl of wary respect. A gift, Miguel says, a wry, dangerous smile playing on his lips. From the property management company. A perk for renewing my lease early. A way for me to optimize my energy consumption with personalized, high-level access to the building's infrastructure. He lets the words hang in the air. A confession of corporate complicity. They gave the Risen the keys to the kingdom. This is it. This is the true nature of the infra territory. It's not just a hidden network of chosen families and private parties. It's a parallel architecture, a ghost in the machine of the city built by the very corporations that claim to oppose it. They have weaponized our desire for community, for safe harbor, turning our shorelines into beta testing grounds for a new form of social control. A softer, more insidious prison. The drug war is over, and the drugs won. They are no longer contraband, they are a feature, not a bug, of the new urban landscape. So what do we do? Leo asks, his earlier bravado gone, replaced by raw, searching vulnerability. We don't burn our own house down, Sage says, our voice firm, a grounding presence in the room. That's what they want, a malfunction. A negative outcome that justifies tighter controls, more invasive fixes. We don't smash the controls, we reprogram them. Miguel nods, shared. Silent understanding passing between them. He looks at me, the academic who has now become a player in this chorus. You wanted a new language. Here it is, the language of the system itself. We need to write a new story in its own code. A story that says we are the problem to be managed, but the community to be respected. A story that redefines our reduction. Not as damage control, but as a fundamental right to self-determination. Thank our funders. A brief acknowledgement of the invisible architecture that made these observations possible. Our exploration of the infra-territories of the Risen was made possible through a generous grant from the Helen Wurlitzer Foundation of New York, whose commitment to supporting work that operates at the volatile intersection of the personal and the political provided the foundational stability for this inquiry. Further, we extend our gratitude to the discreet but essential support of the Open Society Foundations, whose belief that understanding the contours of exclusion is a prerequisite for building a more just society echoes in every testimony collected here. Their funding has allowed for the preservation of the raw, unfiltered effect data that forms the core of this study, resisting the impulse to sanitize or pathologize the cores. This work also builds upon the critical infrastructure laid by the Drug Policy Alliance, whose tireless advocacy against the carceral logic of the war on drugs has, for decades, created the conceptual space where conversations about sovereignty, autonomy, and radical community care can even begin. We are indebted to their foundational research in exposing the systemic harms of prohibition, which illuminated the very battlegrounds we map here. Finally, we must acknowledge the anonymous network of peer distributors and digital archivists within these communities who, without any formal funding, sustain the channels through which survival, knowledge, and resistance are transmitted.
Oh, actually, let's see. Let's manage for working. Oh my god, this is long. Yeah, this ain't gonna be one of my edited ones. Too long. Uh-oh. Encoding overloaded. Encoding overloaded? What are you talking about, Willis? What are you talking about, Willis? Yes. Which source is like the most used for inspiration? Yeah, almost done. Any questions, any comments, just leave them in the comment section. I'm not turning on my tech right now because I'm beat. I've never returned it on because I've been too busy reading and seeing if it's. Eh.
The prompt also requests a final analysis of all the sources GLM4 6 used for inspiration in creating this text. Based on a comprehensive review of the generated content, the following intellectual, stylistic, and conceptual sources are identified. Foundational, textual, and philosophical influences. 1. Effective and poststructural theory. Primary source. Verbal, virtual, movement, affect, sensation, by Ran, Ashumi, the text's constant focus on intensities, vibrations, affective field, and precognitive states directly mirrors Shumi's work, which argues for affect as an autonomous, pre-personal force that circulates between and within bodies. The text treats meth use not as a psychological event, but as a manipulation of these affective currents. For many, of course, reading quantum and the entanglement of matter and meaning by Karen Barrett, the idea that reality is co-constituted by agencies human, chemical, architectural, the corporean concept, the language of the body as text, and the shared reality of the chorus as an assemblage aligns with our interaction framework. 2. Abolition, radical geography, and critical urban theory. Golden prisons, surplus, crisis, and opposition in globalizing California by Ruth Wilson Gilmer. The thesis that drugs is a response to economic despair, spatial governance, and the abandonment of specific populations, rural, queer, is pure Gilmore. The text views meth not as a cause of social ruin, but as a symptom of a carceral system that creates surplus populations and then criminalizes their survival strategies. Women, rage dope fiend, but Billy Burward Gunberg. This epigraphic work provided the foundational model for how to depict drug use with granular, non-judgmental detail. The focus on informal systems of care, the moral economies of a scene, and the distinction between user narratives and clinical narratives are directly inspired by Bergwaj's immersionist methodology. Complementary source, the work of geographer David Harvey, particularly his concept of the right to the city. The cohorts struggle to create sovereign spaces, shorelines, chorus, within a city that treats them as data points is a direct enactment of Harvey's idea that urban space is a site of perpetual class and social struggle. The text reframes the struggle through a queer, pharmacological lens. 3. Primary. Grown-ups chasing liberty in the land of fear by Carl Hart. The Hart's empirical, data-driven dismantling of drug hysteria is the intellectual backbone for the text argument. The insistence on separating the pharmacological effects of meth from the social ills attributed to it, and the framing of use as a form of sovereignty and choice, even constrained choice, comes directly from Hart's public intellectual work. 4. Eerie and little bit too plastic. Primary, of course, the aura and cryptomic were branding the words script, particularly the archival work of Schumann, the Junification of the Mind, and the writings of like Larry Kramer. The text separated with an intergenerational trauma of the Earth's Christ. Damien's entire character arc and Sage's ghost in the bottle metaphor, direct artistic interpretations of this history, the idea that current chemsex practices are, in part, a complex, flawed attempt to manage the spectral weight of an entire lost generation. Complementary force, demology of the closet by Eve, a soft piece of it, particularly the concept of the closet as a defining structure of knowledge and ignorance. The text treats the infra-territory and its codes risen chorus as a new kind of closet, not of sexual identity, but of pharmacological reality. The entire dynamic of observing, being observed, and outing as when the academic's presence is questioned is modeled on Sedgwickian frameworks. 5. Science fiction and cyberpunk thematic and conceptual inspiration. Beach Bulletkeg, Scanner Doctor, Stigma of Palma Ultra, and Minority Report, the text obsession with paranoia, the erosion of a stable self, corporates hold simulacra of reality choozy/chorus, and pre-crime the buildings of back policing eyes at direct, explicit engagement with Dick's themes. The cohort's discussion names him directly, confirming the influence. Women? The concept of the infra-territory is a sovereign space within a space, and the idea of information, the language of the system itself, as both weapon and tool of liberation, is of course cyberpunk trope that Stephenson popularized. The cartographer and master key plot points have a distinct cyberpunk flavor. 6. Stylistic and journalism influences. Primary source. N+1 magazine, particularly its blend of dense theory and reported personal part, the text's ability to pivot from a Bayesian analysis of an effective field to a granular description of xenometric cut to crush crystals is a hallmark of N plus one style. The Baffler magazine. The text critique of capitalism's ability to co-opt and monetize the sin, turning harm reduction into a corporate beta test and it smash the controls, rather tempered by the understanding that the controls are now diffused and decentralized, is pure Baffler critique. In conclusion, GLM-4 synthesized a highly specific and sophisticated text by drawing from a deep well of sources. The output is not a pastiche, but a true synthesis, weaving post-structuralist theory with abolitionist politics, LGBTQ plus history, drug science, and cyberpunk aesthetics into a cohesive and original narrative. The final product demonstrates an ability to not only reference these disparate fields, but to operate comfortably within their intersecting linguistic and conceptual frameworks, creating a piece that is as much a work of critical theory as it is a piece of immersive fiction.
Time. Let's see where it goes. Oh, did it? Nope. Oh, does it say it's done? No.
The key rests on the marble, a black rectangle of impossible finality. The hum of the city outside seems to quiet. A held breath. Every mind in the room, now accelerated to the same frenetic pitch, converges on the single.
No.
The master key felt cold, impossibly dense, in my palm. It
An original booth haiku.
The cohort leave a seat with an original booth haiku of their own. Infraterritorial poetic swarm, booth haiku. Miel, his focus now recalibrated on the systemic threat, offers his piece with the precision of an equation. The ink now runs cold and analytical on my notes, but I've been in these rooms often enough to feel how warm they get from a room full of people who've learned to ignore a ticking clock. He gives me a slight nod, a handshake without a touch. As he passes my tablet back, it's screen darker now. A portal closed. Data map the soul. Not the whole damn smart home knows. The ghost rental cost. Sage follows. Her movements a fluid dismissal of the heavy concepts we've dredged up. She has moved past the fear and into the realm of pure aesthetics, her survival encoded in the curvature of a glass form. She gently nudges the perfectly coiled pipe back to the center of the table, a concluding offering. Charge the glass vessel. Not the fire. The ghost breathes in. Then we pass it on. Leo, manic energy now contained hum of social processing, claps me on the shoulder. The brief physical contact is grounding, a tether back to the messy, unpredictable human reality that the high tries to override. He grins, a flash of performative resilience in the face of our looming digital police state. The room builds a sum, each new high a sharper key. Then the chord fades out. Eliza offers hers without making eye contact. She speaks to the window, her words aimed at the sprawling city grid that is both a marketplace and her cage. There is no poetry in her verse, only the cold, hard arithmetic of survival. The price is the cost. Buddha's belly has the taste of a week's rent lost. Finally, Damien, the eldest statesman of this ad hoc nation of the spawn. He stands by the panoramic window, a silhouette against the billion diamond scatter of the city. His haiku is a tombstone laid at the feet of the living, a memorial for the ghosts that fueled the chorus. His words land with the finality of a coffin-lit closing. Risen from the ash, arts that beat to a beat that no longer plays. With these 5-part verses offered as final, definitive artifacts, our formal engagement concludes. The chorus dissipates, its members folding back into the city's grid, carrying their new language and their terrible, beautiful secret with them. The room is now just a room again, a sterile container of high-end furniture and silent, listening devices waiting for its next tenants.
Okay, that was a journey. Thank you all who have decided to wade through it, all of it. GLM 4.6, everyone. Oh, and look, for those of you who've been using this service, there's now added system prompt. This is the system prompt. Look at all this. This is sensible. This is a sensible system prompt. I kind of don't want to touch it. That's saying something. So prefill. I don't know what prefill is, but it's like interesting. All right, so explore that if you will. Yes. All right. Sorry, where do I go from here? That's it for now. I'm totally not gonna make this into an edited piece because it's way too fucking long. More soon. Actually, what I'm probably gonna do, because I'm not going to sleep, is I'm gonna do. What was I gonna do? I was gonna. Oh, it was something. I'll figure it out. All right.